Chapter 11:27. Night enveloped the entire Tianfeng Sea area. However, under this darkness, the atmosphere of the entire Tianfeng Sea area was extremely noisy, and the various forces were not calm. The mysterious young man had arrived at the 100-sect competition, killed several people, and suppressed the 100-sect competition by himself. He had forced the supreme elders of the 3 sects to descend and even killed the martial saint of the Spirit Ruins Paradise, the Spirit Ruins Patriarch. When the news was spread by the people of the 100 sects, it was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, causing an earth-shattering earthquake in the entire Tianfeng Sea area. Who was the Spirit Ruins Patriarch? He was an almighty from one of the 4 superpowers of the East Sea of the Tianfeng Sea area. However, he had actually been killed? How could this not shock the various forces and powerhouses? They could not even believe this fact. It could be said that the Tianfeng Sea area had never been in such turmoil in the past 1,000 years. At that moment, all the forces in the entire Tianfeng Sea area mobilized their resources in an attempt to find out about Yi Chen's past. After finding out about Yi Chen's relationship with the King Mu Fort, countless forces rushed to the King Mu Fort with great gifts, in the imperial city of the Great Li Dynasty. In the quiet and luxurious study room, the fragrance of sandalwood lingered, making one feel relaxed and happy. Beside a desk, a dignified figure was quietly reading the memorial in his hand. The Great Li Emperor, Shang Wudao, was an overlord who controlled the 4 superpowers. The flickering candlelight illuminated Shang Wudao's face, making it hard to tell whether it was dark or dark. There was a faint trace of terrifying majesty exuding from within. He Jiming, that old thing, is actually dead. The former slowly closed the memorial and narrowed his eyes. The white-haired young man killed a martial king with a flick of his finger. In the end, he even executed a heaven-defying divinity. He stood up and slowly walked to the window. He stood with his hands behind his back and raised his head to look at the lights outside. His eyes flickered. "King Mu Fort, King Mu, you've played a good move for me, Your Majesty." At this moment, the silence of the study room was suddenly broken by the sharp sound of a door being broken. Then, a black shadow appeared in front of the former like a ghost and knelt down on one knee. "Your Majesty, bad news." "I already know." Shang Wudao's expression was calm as he looked straight at the latter. "What's the reaction from the Grand Preceptor?" "The Grand Tutor said that the Dali dynasty should draw this person to our side, and that we must not offend him." The man wanted to say something but stopped. "Even the Grand Preceptor, who's so upright, has given in?" Shang Wudao squinted his eyes in surprise. "Tell me something I don't know." "Tonight, our Tianfeng Sea area is in an uproar. Various forces are heading to Tianfeng City. Even the Sea Clan has sent their emissaries." At this point, the man paused for a moment, as if it was difficult for him to speak. "Including the first prince, the second prince, and the third prince, those 3 unfilial sons can't stand it anymore?" Shang Wudao laughed heartily as if he was not surprised at all. "You are indeed my good son, Your Majesty. How should we deal with the King Mu Fort now?" The man said intermittently. "Pass down my order. Confer the title of King Mu to King Mu and have the right to establish a nation. At the same time, announce to the public that in 3 days, I will hold an emperor's birthday and invite all the heroes in the world to gather in the capital." As soon as these words came out, the man jerked his head up in disbelief. The right to establish a nation. It was night, Tianfeng City, King Mu Fort. In a quiet room, Yi Chen lay quietly on the bed. His breathing was even and strong as if he had fallen asleep. However, his face was a little pale. Meng Meng lay on the side of the bed, sleeping soundly on the former's arm. Occasionally, she would even talk in her sleep. At this moment, a soft knock on the door came from outside. One could vaguely see a beautiful figure reflected on the window. Whoosh! The little girl who was sleeping soundly woke up and looked outside the door vigilantly. Her little face seemed to be a little nervous. A gentle voice slowly came from outside. Meng Meng, can I come in? You're not allowed to enter. The hostility in the little girl's eyes increased greatly. She ran over and held the door tightly. You're bad people. Daddy was injured because he saved you. The person outside fell silent for a while before saying, Meng Meng, your daddy is injured. Uncle Sher specially brewed some medicine for me to send over. He can only recover after drinking the medicine. Hearing this, the little girl hesitated for a moment before tiptoeing to open the door, revealing a slightly haggard and exquisite face. It was Mu Kaiwei. Mu Kaiwei was holding a bowl of soup in her hand. She glanced at Yi Chen, who was on the bed by instinct, and said to the little girl with a smile, Can I come in, sister? The little girl rolled her eyes at her and did not say anything. Instead, she turned around and walked to the window, grabbing Yi Chen's hand tightly. Mu Kaiwei felt a sharp pain in her heart when she saw that. It was as if she was being pricked by a needle. Yi Chen fainted on the way back to the city after killing the patriarch of Spirit Ruins. The group brought him back to the King Mu fort. However, Meng Meng had been guarding her father the entire time. She rejected everyone in the King Mu fort and refused to let them get close to her father. The only reason the little girl had a good impression of him was because of Shi Qianhan. After all, the two of them had met before. How could Mu Kaiwei not know about the little girl's hostility? However, she did not mind. Instead, she walked to the bed and looked at the unconscious Yi Chen. She said with a gentle smile, Meng Meng, can you help me lift your father's head? I'm going to feed him medicine. The little girl hesitated for a moment before doing as she was told. She lifted Yi Chen's head gently. Mu Kaiwei was relieved. She scooped up the soup with a spoon and fed it to Yi Chen calmly. Occasionally, the soup would flow out of the corner of his mouth. She would wipe it clean with a handkerchief. The entire process was meticulous. The hostility in the little girl's eyes gradually dissipated after witnessing everything. However, tears suddenly flowed out of the corner of her eyes. Why are you crying? Mu Kaiwei suddenly became nervous when she saw that. Did I do something wrong? Tell me. I'll apologize to you, okay? As she spoke, she reached out to wipe her tears. I don't want you to care. The little girl slapped her hand away. She could not stop her tears. If Daddy dies, I don't want to live anymore. Buzz, Mu Kaiwei's mind buzzed. She stared blankly at the 6-year-old girl in front of her, and her heart that had just calmed down ached again. A stream of tears slowly flowed down from the corner of her eyes. She put down the bowl in her hand and covered her mouth with her hand. She choked and said, Your daddy won't die. Uncle Sher said that your daddy is just overly exhausted. He'll be fine after some rest. As soon as she finished speaking, the little girl, who was grabbing Yi Chen's right hand tightly, suddenly felt the latter's hand move. At the next moment, she saw Yi Chen wake up from his sleep. Daddy, the little girl could not be bothered to wipe her tears. She threw herself into Yi Chen's embrace immediately. Her tears were like pearls with a broken necklace. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:28. Yi Chen looked at the little girl who was crying in his arms. Yi Chen could not help but pat her back and say while smiling, What's wrong? Who made Daddy's good daughter cry? Tell Daddy, Daddy will avenge you. After saying that, he purposely put on a fierce look. The little girl and Mu Kaiwei laughed at the same time. The former wiped her snot on his sleeve and said with red eyes, It's you, bad daddy. You're the one who made me cry. Yi Chen was stunned. He did not know whether to laugh or cry as he said, Daddy, can you slap yourself to vent your anger for my princess? He pretended to raise his hand. No! The little girl hugged his arm hurriedly, tears streaming down her face again. I thought Daddy would never wake up again. Yi Chen fell silent. He had forcefully used the passage of time divinity, causing his divine consciousness to be damaged. That was why he had fallen asleep. Unexpectedly, he had scared his daughter. When Mu Kaiwei saw this, she could not help but say, Mr. Yi, you might not know this, but you were unconscious for half a day. During that time, Meng Meng has been by your side. She hasn't eaten anything until now. She did not mention that the little girl was hostile to them, nor did she mention that the little girl refused to let them into the house. Yi Chen could not help but pick the little girl up and extend his arm to wipe her tears. All right, stop crying. Don't cry. I'm awake now, aren't I? My sweetheart, every time you shed a tear, my heart hurts a little more. The little girl sniffled and stopped crying. However, her eyes were still red. Yi Chen said with a pained heart, Are you hungry? Let's go. Daddy will bring you to eat. After saying that, he carried the little girl out of the house and realized that the entire King Mu fort was surrounded by people. As if sensing his confusion, Mu Kaiwei, who was following behind him, said, Mr. Yi, these people are all here because of your reputation. Her eyes were filled with gratitude as she spoke to this point. Not only did Yi Chen save the King Mu fort, but he also made the fort famous. Now, he was in the limelight and even surpassed the spiritual ruin Grotto Heaven. Yi Chen came to a realization. He then brought his daughter to the kitchen. The entire kitchen became busy. There was nothing he could do, because that was the son-in-law. No matter what the son-in-law wanted to eat, they had to find a way to fulfill it, whether it was flying in the sky or swimming in the water. It could be said that Yi Chen's reputation in the King Mu fort had reached its peak. The little fellow asked in confusion, Daddy, why do they call you son-in-law? Son-in-law, what do you mean? Yi Chen glanced at Mu Kaiwei by instinct. He did not know how to explain it, so he said, It means relatives. Oh, the little guy replied. Soon, dozens of scrumptious dishes were placed on the table. Perhaps because Yi Chen was there, the little girl was much bolder. She ate most of the dishes by herself. Yi Chen seemed to have recalled something. He looked around and said, Where's Shi Qianhan? Young Master Shi has returned. Mu Kaiwei took out a letter and handed it to Yi Chen. Young Master Shi asked me to pass this to you before he left. Yi Chen tore off the letter gently and read it secretly. Brother Yi, seeing your words is like meeting you. I'm very happy to have met you this time. I really want to apologize to you when you wake up, but something happened in the clan, so I had no choice but to rush back overnight. There were only 100 words on the letter, and many of them were unclear. For example, how he survived and how he came to the ancient desolate realm. It seemed like he left in a hurry and did not have time to explain too much. After Yi Chen burned the letter, he looked at Mu Kaiwei and said, I heard that he's from the Shi family of the Eastern Desolate Realm? Logically speaking, Shi Qianhan was an earthling from the 10,000 Swords Pavilion of the Kunlun Ruins. How did he become a member of the Shi family of the Eastern Desolate Realm? Yes, young Master Shi is from the Shi family of the Eastern Desolate Realm. Mu Kaiwei nodded slightly and said, The Shi family of the Eastern Desolate Realm is extremely ancient and mysterious. They are known as the Overlord of the Eastern Desolate Realm. Even the 4 overlords of the Tianfeng Sea area have to fear them. The Eastern Desolate Realm. Yi Chen frowned slightly. He did not hate Shi Qianhan at all. Although he had attacked Yi Chen on the ghost ship, he had only done so because he was threatened. If they were in each other's shoes, Yi Chen would make the same choice if Su Yuhan was captured and she wanted Yi Chen to go against everyone in the world. His only regret was that Shi Qianhan had left in a hurry, and he did not have the time to understand some things. Most importantly, Yu Jingzi of the White Jade capital in the north had once said that the ghost ship most likely led to the Eastern Desolate Realm, the Tianfeng Sea area, and the Middle Continent. At this moment, footsteps came from afar, and King Mu and Jiu'er walked over. Young master, you're awake. Jiu'er was surprised to see him. Yi Chen nodded lightly and looked at King Mu. Seeing that he wanted to say something but hesitated, he could not help but ask, what happened? King Mu took a deep breath in and said slowly, Mr. Yi, there are many people outside who want to see you. Towards the young man before him, his emotions were the most complicated. A year ago, the latter was a cripple that the King Mu fort had rescued from the outside. When his daughter was about to marry him, he would not agree no matter what. However, it was this piece of trash in his eyes who had saved them twice when the King Mu fort was in danger. Fort Master Mu, you know my personality. I've always liked peace, Yi Chen said. I understand that. King Mu nodded slightly and said hesitantly, I've sent these people back, but 3 of them have put me in a difficult position. Jur could not help but say, Young Master, the Crown Prince, Second Prince, and Third Prince of the Great Li Dynasty are here. They're clamoring to see you. Mu Caiwei's expression changed when she heard that. As one of the 4 overlords of the Tianfeng Sea area, although the Great Li Dynasty was extremely tyrannical to the outside world, there were all sorts of internal strife. In any dynasty, the most tempting thing was the throne, and the Great Li Dynasty was no exception. Although the Great Li Emperor was currently at his peak, he had many sons. Among them, the Crown Prince, the Second Prince, and the Third Prince were fighting the most. The 3 princes were divided into 3 factions, causing all the civil and military officials to choose their own factions. They only wanted to obtain the credit of being the emperor. Before this, although the King Mu fort was a subject of the Great Li Dynasty, they were merely ants in the eyes of the 3 princes. Now that the 3 princes were here, their purpose was naturally self-evident. Mu Caiwei's lips moved slightly as she thought to this point. Just when she was about to speak, she heard Yi Chen say, I'm not interested in fighting for power with these princes and grandsons. Tell them to scram. His exact words? King Mu sucked in a breath of cold air. He only suppressed the shock in him, and replied after Yi Chen nodded. Yi Chen glanced at the little girl who had put down her chopsticks and said while smiling, My dear daughter, go out and play with Sister Jiu. Daddy has something to tell your sister Mu. He desperately wanted to know the direction of the ghost ship. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:29. In the King Mu fort, Juror stood in the courtyard and looked at the pavilion in the distance from time to time. Under the reflection of the candlelight, she could vaguely see 2 long shadows on the window paper. She clasped her fingers tightly and paced back and forth. Young mistress should know that I lied to her. A year ago, when Yi Chen left the Tianfeng Sea area, Juror could not bear to see Mu Caiwei suffer, so she lied and said that Yi Chen promised to marry her in 3 years. She knew it was not good to lie. However, she could not bear to let her young mistress be sad. After all, she and her young mistress had grown up together and were like sisters. They had already thought it through. However, Yi Chen had returned after only a year. The lie would be exposed sooner or later. She was not worried that her young mistress would punish her. The only thing she was worried about was that if Yi Chen showed any reluctance, her young mistress might suffer a blow. Young master should like young mistress too, right? The little girl patted her mature chest and muttered, Yes, young master will definitely like young mistress. In front of her, there was a group of children playing crazily. One of them was Ming Ming. Jur could not help but glance at the little girl, and a hint of uncertainty flashed across her eyes. But young master already has a daughter. Judging from his daughter, she should be 6 years old, right? In other words, young master already had a family before he met young mistress and me? At the thought of this, the little girl's face immediately sank. She simply sat on the ground and held her chin with her hand as she stared at the little girl in a daze. I wonder what young master's wife looks like? If young master and young mistress get together, will young master's wife? In the pavilion, the red candles flickered. Half a year after you left, the conflict between the King Mu fort and the Great Li dynasty became more and more intense. My father and I once thought that the King Mu fort would not be able to withstand the Great Li dynasty's cavalry. In the room, Mu Caiwei, who had a cold expression, moved her red lips slightly as she recounted Yi Chen's experience without him. Yi Chen's gaze was complicated. Although he had helped the King Mu fort eliminate the surrounding forces before he left, he had neglected the fatal threat of the Great Li dynasty. He could also imagine that after he left, the strongest people in the King Mu fort would only be Mu Caiwei and King Mu. At most, they would be at the pseudo-emperor stage. It would be a pipe dream for them to go against a country. Mu Kaiwei sized him up with her beautiful eyes and said with a smile, "But at that time, the Dali dynasty did not attack us. Why?" Yi Chen was puzzled. "Because there's been a huge change." Mu Kaiwei recalled, "Half a year after you left, a netherworld ship sailed over from my Heaven Wind Sea region." Yi Chen's eyes gleamed when he heard that. He said immediately, "What happened after that?" At that time, all the super forces of the entire Heavenly Wind Sea region seemed to have reached some kind of agreement. They actually sent all their experts to the netherworld ship. Mu Kaiwei opened her red lips and said slowly, "These forces even include the 4 overlords of the Great Li dynasty." Speaking of this, there seemed to be some fear between her brows. At that time, the entire Tianfeng Sea area was completely locked down by the Dali dynasty navy. We had no way of knowing what happened. The only thing we know is that an earth-shattering battle took place on the surface of the sea. That battle lasted for 3 days before everything calmed down. It lasted for 3 days? Yi Chen's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at her fixedly. "Didn't you try to find out more about it?" "It's not that we didn't want to, but we didn't dare to." Mu Kaiwei took a deep breath in and shook her head. That day, all the forces within 10,000 kilometers of the battle were annihilated. Not a single one was left alive. After that, the 4 superforces said that they would wipe out the Sea Clan. In other words, the forces of the Tianfeng Sea region won this battle? Yi Chen frowned. The netherworld ship appeared above the northern sea, and was first targeted by the 5 martial saints who crossed over from Zhongzhou. While the crazy Taoist fought the 5 martial saints by himself, he brought Su Yuhan and the rest to the Tianfeng Sea region. Now that the 4 super forces were still alive, didn't that mean that the crazy Taoist had lost in that battle? Then where were Su Yuhan and the rest? Yi Chen could not help but feel nervous as he thought to this point. His eyes flickered nonstop. From the looks of it, Mu Kaiwei and the others knew very little. The only thing that puzzled him was what exactly caused the 4 super forces of the Tianfeng Sea region to cause such a huge commotion. He did not know if it was his imagination, but he had a feeling that the existence of the ghost ship was a taboo in the entire ancient desolate realm, a taboo that made everyone feel uneasy. No matter what, the 4 super forces are related to this matter. Yi Chen squinted and thought to himself, "Looks like I have to deal with these forces. I don't believe that I can't dig out any information from them." He looked at the sky outside the house and stood up to say to Mu Kaiwei, "It's getting late. You should go back and rest." With that, he turned around and was about to leave. Mu Kaiwei bit her lip and suddenly said, "Does your promise still count?" With that, she could not help but lower her head and clench her fingers tightly. A blush quickly rose from her cheeks to her ears. "What promise?" Yi Chen turned around and looked at her. He couldn't remember making any promises to her. Mu Kaiwei's body trembled slightly when she heard that. Then, she raised her head and looked at him. Disbelief surged in her beautiful eyes. Then, she seemed to have thought of something, and her face suddenly turned extremely pale. She shook her head and said, "And nothing." As soon as she finished speaking, she stood up and walked out of the room. Yi Chen took a good look at her back and shook his head lightly. When he walked out of the house, he saw Jiu, who was guarding outside, chasing after the former. King Mu walked over and stood next to Yi Chen. He sighed softly and said, "What do you plan to do next?" He had vaguely guessed that the 3-year promise back then might have been an excuse from Jiu. The more that was the case, the sadder he felt. Yi Chen glanced at him. Seeing that he had something to say, he said while smiling, "Do you have something to say to me, Fort Master Mu? I still can't hide it from you." King Mu shook his head slightly and said, "In 3 days, the Great Li dynasty will hold the Emperor's birthday, and the King Mu fort is also on the invitation list. So, you're saying that you want me to go with you guys?" Yi Chen looked at him with a spurious smile. "It's not what I want." King Mu forced a smile and said, "It's what outsiders think. I believe you know that ever since you caused a ruckus during the 100-sect competition, everyone has tied the King Mu fort to you. He was right. To everyone, the King Mu fort and Yi Chen's forces belonged to the current King Mu fort. If you like Evil Dad in the city, please collect. Evil Dad in the City. Chapter 1130. It was a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. The good thing was that from now on, as long as Yi Chen was around, no one would dare to touch the King Mu fort. The bad thing was that if anything happened to Yi Chen or if he left, the King Mu fort would definitely be faced with endless killing intent. Therefore, King Mu was very concerned. In his opinion, the Emperor's birthday in 3 days might be a turning point for the King Mu fort and the Great Li dynasty to ease the relationship. The Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven received an invitation too? Yi Chen did not answer his question. King Mu nodded immediately. Sure. I'll go to the Great Li dynasty with your King Mu fort in 3 days to participate in the Emperor's birthday, Yi Chen said calmly. King Mu, on the other hand, was slightly stunned. Before he came, he had thought of many ways to persuade Yi Chen. Who would have thought that Yi Chen would agree without even thinking? However, he had no idea that Yi Chen had planned to contact the Great Li dynasty after he found out that the Great Li dynasty was one of the forces participating in the attack on the ghost ship. Thank you, Mr. Yi. King Mu bowed solemnly, his face filled with gratitude. After all, Yi Chen had done a lot for the King Mu fort. Now that he was still helping them without asking for anything in return, how could he not be grateful? Yi Chen nodded lightly and walked over to carry Meng Meng, who was playing like crazy, back into the house. The little girl's face was flushed. It was obvious that she had not been so crazy in a long time. My dear daughter, are you done playing? Yi Chen pinched her little face and said while smiling, Go wash up and sleep. The little girl did not move at all. She suddenly raised her head and looked at him quietly. Daddy, when are we going to find Mommy? Soon. Isn't Daddy looking for her now? Yi Chen said with a headache. He did not know how to explain it to his daughter. After all, she was young and did not understand how an adult thought. You keep saying soon, soon. The little girl's eyes turned red as she choked, but I haven't seen Mommy in a long time. Why are you crying? Yi Chen panicked and went forward to hug her. Unexpectedly, the little girl took a few steps back and looked at him stubbornly. Her tears could not stop flowing. Daddy, you're lying to me. Why would Daddy lie to you? Yi Chen looked at her blankly. You're lying to me. The little fellow wiped his tears and said, I asked them just now. They said that young master wants you to marry that Aunt Mu. You already have a mother, how can you marry that Aunt Mu? Yi Chen's entire body froze when he heard that. He looked at her without moving. I'm not a child anymore. Don't think that I don't understand. Sparkling tears hung in the corners of the little fellow's eyes. He sniffled and said, You definitely don't like me anymore. You want to be with that Aunt Mu, no? Yi Chen's mind was blown. He forced a smile and said, Can you listen to me? I'm not listening, I'm not listening. The little girl shook her head like a rattledrum and looked at him with hatred. You don't love Mommy anymore, and you don't love Meng Meng anymore. Meng Meng doesn't want to be with you anymore. Meng Meng wants to look for Mommy by herself. As he spoke, the little fellow turned around and was about to walk out the door. His cries were so pitiful that it made one's heart ache. Yi Chen moved and picked her up despite her resistance. He took a deep breath in and said in a trembling voice, I've never liked Aunt Mu. I've always loved your Mommy. Can I swear? His heart hurt, it hurt a lot. Before this, the way he interacted with his daughter was that he thought he gave her the best. No matter what he did, he would not share it with his daughter. At the end of the day, he thought that his daughter was too young, so he should not let her bear too much. However, his daughter's resolute words just now not only stung him, but also made him realize his own problem. His daughter was an independent person after all. She had her own consciousness and cognition. She was not her parents' appendage, nor was she a substitute that her parents took for granted. The little girl was still struggling with what he said. Yi Chen sighed softly and said after putting her down, "Don't you want to look for Mommy? Then Daddy will tell you about Mommy's situation, okay?" The little girl stopped running this time. Instead, she looked at him with bloodshot eyes. "Firstly, if we want to look for Mommy, we have to know where Mommy is first, right?" Yi Chen squatted down and tried to make himself as tall as the little girl. The little girl nodded. Yi Chen said, "But we don't know where Mommy is, do we?" The little girl nodded. "Isn't that it? I've been looking for Mommy all this time." Yi Chen tried his best to speak in a way that she could understand. Firstly, Mommy, Grandpa, Grandma, and Qian were all taken away by that crazy grandpa. Moreover, they left on the same boat, right? The little girl nodded again and said worriedly, "Is that crazy grandpa a human trafficker? I heard from my teacher that human traffickers like to kidnap people and break their hands and feet. They make them beg and steal." Yi Chen was speechless at that moment. "Have you ever seen a terrifying human trafficker who withstood the joint attack of 5 martial saints and had 3 of them killed instead?" He said in between tears and laughter, "That crazy grandpa isn't a human trafficker. It's just that he's old and has some dementia. I don't know where he took your mother and the rest to." At this point, he paused for a moment and said, "I've found out that a few bad guys are related to your mother, so I'm going to find out from those bad guys. Do you understand?" The little girl nodded at first, then shook her head and said in a daze, "Since they're bad guys, how could they tell me where Mommy is? Then beat them up." Yi Chen pretended to be fierce. "Beat them up until they tell me." But the little girl's tears turned into laughter. Yi Chen heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that she was in a much better mood. He explained, "As for Daddy and Auntie Moo, it's not what you think. Daddy doesn't like Auntie Moo. I pretended to marry Auntie Moo before, just like you guys were playing house." As soon as he said that, Mu Kaiwei, who was standing outside the house, froze. Her face turned pale at a visible speed. "Young mistress." Jior held her tightly. Mu Kaiwei forced a smile. "I'm fine. Young master is too heartless. No, I have to talk to him." Jior was furious. "Let's go back." Mu Kaiwei stopped her. Her expression was extremely absent-minded, and she staggered as she walked 3 steps at a time. In the house, Yi Chen looked out of the window deeply. He then turned his head and said to his daughter, "All right, if you have anything to say about Daddy in the future, you must say it, okay?" "Got it." The little girl lowered her head in embarrassment. "Brat, you still know how to reprimand Daddy." Yi Chen rubbed her hair angrily and hugged her. "You don't know how sad what you said made Daddy. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect Evil Dad in the City." Chapter 1131. It was night, late at night. Yi Chen only removed the little girl's foot from his leg after she fell asleep. He then got up and covered her with a blanket. After setting up a barrier in the house, he walked out quietly and disappeared into the boundless night. Kunwu Holy Land, one of the 4 super forces in the Tianfeng Sea area. Even though it was late at night, the Holy Land was still brightly lit and heavily guarded. Yi Chen restrained his aura and went deep into the night. His divine consciousness spread out. His goal tonight was to meet the 9-yang sword leader of the Kunwu Holy Land. As an almighty of the Kunwu Holy Land, this person must know about the ghost ship. As his divine consciousness spread out, he immediately sensed the situation within a radius of 50 kilometers. Some disciples were sitting in the cave abode, meditating and cultivating. Some disciples guarding the mountain gate forced themselves to guard everything. Among them, the lowest cultivation base was a martial venerable, and the highest was a martial king. There were dozens of them. However, to his disappointment, he did not sense the 9-yang sword leader's aura after patrolling the entire Kunwu Holy Land. "Is this person not here?" Yi Chen frowned slightly. Subsequently, he charged toward the main peak of the Kunwu Holy Land, Kunwu Peak. Inside Kunwu Peak, an old figure sat cross-legged in a cave abode that was filled with vitality. The moment Yi Chen released his divine consciousness, the man's eyes suddenly opened. Lightning flashed through them. Someone barged into the Kunwa Holy Land? After saying that, he stood up and took a step out. His figure appeared outside, and his gaze was like lightning as he surveyed the surroundings. Nothing unusual. The old man seemed to heave a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to return, he suddenly turned around and looked behind him. In his eyes, a white-haired young man had appeared behind him without him noticing. The old man's heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to speak, he realized that the white-haired young man's eyes seemed to have turned into huge black holes that were spinning violently. A few seconds later, his entire body became extremely relaxed, and he stood on the spot without moving at all. Yi Chen's eyes flickered as he said, "Tell me, where did the 9-yang sword leader of the Kunwa Holy Land go?" "I don't know," the old man said with a blank look. "Half a day ago, the sword leader received an invitation and went out. He didn't meet us." "What invitation?" Yi Chen asked. "I don't know," the old man said. About 2 hours later, Yi Chen returned to the Qingmu fort. However, there was confusion between his brows. The 9-yang sword head of the Kunwa Holy Ground had disappeared. Not only him, but even the palace master of the Great Purity Palace, Fairy Taiching, had also disappeared. Both of them disappeared almost at the same time. They disappeared during the day when Yi Chen was unconscious. Furthermore, they had all received an invitation before disappearing. They had never told anyone about the details of the invitation before they left. What surprised him the most was that the Spirit Ruins Paradise was annihilated. Not a single person was left alive. Whether it was the cave mansions or the halls, they were all destroyed. "What a coincidence!" Yi Chen smirked. "Of all times, you disappeared when I wanted to see them. Are you hiding from me?" Although he said that, he frowned deeply. But who destroyed the Spirit Ruins Paradise? Although he had killed the Spirit Ruins Patriarch, he did not vent his anger on the Spirit Ruins Paradise. Moreover, although the Spirit Ruins Patriarch was dead, with the foundation of the Spirit Ruins Paradise, unless the 3 great forces attacked, they would not be able to destroy it. But now, the Spirit Ruins Utopia was silently destroyed without leaving any traces behind. Coupled with the disappearance of the 9-yang sword head and the palace master of the Great Purity Palace, it was very thought-provoking. Now that the 9-yang sword head and the palace master of the Great Purity Palace have disappeared without a trace, coupled with the death of the Spirit Ruins Patriarch, the 3 superforces are leaderless. Yi Chen lifted his head to look at the night sky. In other words, the 3 breakthroughs to find out the whereabouts of the ghost ship have been completely cut off. The only target now is the Great Li Dynasty. The Great Li Dynasty, huh? Thinking to this point, he muttered to himself, "Looks like I really have to go in 3 days." As the sky gradually brightened, an incomparably shocking news resounded throughout the entire Tianfeng Sea area. The Spirit Ruins Paradise had been destroyed. This news was like a heavy bomb, completely causing waves to surge in the Tianfeng Sea area that had finally calmed down. That was one of the 4 super forces. Putting aside the dead Martial Saint, the Spirit Ruins Patriarch, there were still dozens of Martial King stage elders in the sect, and there were countless martial sect masters. However, it had been destroyed overnight, and it was done without anyone knowing. How could this not shock everyone? Even the people from the Qingmu fort were no exception. In the next 3 days, Yi Chen was pushed to the top of the wave again. Everyone suspected that Yi Chen had destroyed the Spirit Ruins Paradise because the Spirit Ruins Patriarch had died in Yi Chen's hands before this. The 4 superforces had been in charge of the Tianfeng Sea area for many years, and no one had ever dared to provoke them. However, such a commotion happened as soon as Yi Chen appeared. How could everyone not suspect him? King Mu found Yi Chen anxiously and said while forcing a smile, "Mr. Yi, did you really destroy the Spirit Ruins Paradise?" Yi Chen was teaching his daughter the breathing technique. He said without even lifting his head, "Would you believe me if I said it wasn't me? I don't believe it either, but the outside world says that you destroyed it. King Mu said in disbelief. So what? Yi Chen smiled lightly. Why should I care about what others think? King Mu could not help but sigh. Mr. Yi, you might not know this, but the 4 super forces have always been on the same side. If an outsider like you really destroyed the Spirit Ruins Paradise, I'm afraid you'll anger the other 3 super forces. Father, bad news. At that moment, Mu Kaiwei walked in quickly. She looked at Yi Chen first and said, There are many people outside. They're clamoring to see Yi Chen, and what? King Mu frowned. Mu Kaiwei hesitated and said, Moreover, I heard that the Kunwu Holy Land's 9 Yang Sword Leader and Tai Qing Palace's Palace Master have gone missing. There's a rumor that it's related to Yi Chen. It's said that Yi Chen wants to unify the Tianfeng Sea area. What? King Mu's expression changed, and he cried out, Who said that? It was a very dangerous signal. They wanted to roast Yi Chen on the volcano and make him the target of everyone. I don't know. In short, it's spreading everywhere. Mu Kaiwei shook her head lightly and looked at Yi Chen in a daze. King Mu's expression changed a few times before he let out a long sigh. Mr. Yi, looks like someone has their eyes on you. He was a smart man. He knew that although Yi Chen could kill the Spirit Ruins Patriarch, the battle was extremely intense. If he really destroyed the Spirit Ruins Paradise, or even killed the 9 Yang Sword Leader and the rest, how could there be no commotion at all? Chapter 1132. What? Great Li Dynasty? In the King Mu fort, King Mu looked at Yi Chen in disbelief. His face was filled with shock. Mu Kaiwei, who was behind him, secretly inhaled sharply. Her phoenix-like eyes were tightly locked together. The Great Li Dynasty is targeting Yi Chen? It's simple. Yi Chen sat calmly and said while smirking coldly, There are 4 super forces in the East Ocean of the Tianfeng Sea area. Now that I've killed the Spirit Ruins Patriarch, it can be said that the entire East Ocean has their eyes on me. King Mu and Mu Kaiwei nodded in unison. And it was at this time that the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven was destroyed, and the Kunwu Holy Land's 9 Yang Sword Head and Tai Qing Palace's Palace Master disappeared one after another. Yi Chen squinted at the 2 of them. A mocking smirk appeared at the corner of his lips. Don't you guys think this is too much of a coincidence? That's right. Mu Kaiwei nodded slightly and said, It's too much of a coincidence. Anyone would subconsciously think that you did it. Yi Chen said with a faint smile, The current situation in the East Ocean is that the 3 super forces are affected. Let me ask you, who benefits the most? Mu Kaiwei and King Mu looked at each other and blurted out at the same time, The Great Li Dynasty. I see King Mu came to a realization and muttered, Moreover, the King Mu fort and the Great Li Dynasty have long had a grudge. If the Great Li Dynasty wants to eliminate the King Mu fort, they'll definitely target you first, Mr. Yi. He was in his 40s after all. Coupled with the fact that he was a ruler, he was naturally not a mediocre person. Therefore, he reacted with just a light nudge from Yi Chen. When he thought about how all of this was done by the Great Li Dynasty, he shuddered all over. He had openly granted the King Mu fort the right to establish a country. In the eyes of outsiders, it seemed extremely generous. However, he had secretly destroyed the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven and even caused the masters of the 2 super forces to disappear. Then, he stirred up the situation in the Tianfeng Sea area and pointed the spearhead at Yi Chen and the King Mu fort. All of these could be considered terrifying. Thinking to this point, his expression changed slightly. Mr. Yi, in that case, the King Mu fort must not attend the Emperor's birthday in 2 days. That's right. Since we already know the Great Li Dynasty's sinister intentions, we shouldn't take the initiative to enter. Chen Kaiwei nodded repeatedly. Otherwise, Yi Chen smiled lightly and said, All the more reason for us to go under such circumstances. Without waiting for the 2 of them to speak, he carefully played with the teacup in his hand and continued, As the saying goes, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against an arrow in the dark. The opponent has already made his move. If you choose to retreat, it will instead be easier for you to expose your flaws. That's true, but… King Mu frowned and hesitated to speak. No buts. It's decided. In 2 days, I will go with you to the capital of Dali Kingdom. Yi Chen said without any hesitation. Moreover, I'd like to see what kind of existence this Emperor of Dali is. With the death of the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins, as well as the death of the 9-Yang Sword Head and the Grand Pure Palace Master, it could be said that only the Dali dynasty knew the details of the ghost ship. Therefore, Yi Chen had to attend this so-called Dali dynasty's Son of Heaven's birthday. As for the conspiracies and murderous intents within, he didn't mind, because as far as he was concerned, no matter how many open spears and hidden arrows there were, he only needed to break them with a single punch. Even though his tone was very calm, when it entered the ears of King Mu and his daughter, it sent a chill down their spines. In the next 2 days, Yi Chen ordered the King Mu fort to find out about the ghost ship and the whereabouts of the Patriarch of Hell and the rest. He stayed in the King Mu fort temporarily to accompany his daughter. Meanwhile, the suspicions the outside world had about him intensified. All sorts of forces gathered around Tianfeng City, clamoring to see Yi Chen. The King Mu fort had already issued a notice regarding all of this. They stated that this had nothing to do with Yi Chen and warned those who were not from the King Mu fort not to enter Tianfeng City. Otherwise, they would be killed without mercy. As a result, it scared many forces. After all, with a terrifying existence like Yi Chen, no one dared to barge in. The undercurrent was growing day by day. On the afternoon of the 2nd day, a powerhouse from the Kunwa Holy Land stood up and shouted, "Senior Yi, please explain yourself. This matter involves the sword head of the Kunwa Holy Land. If it turns out that it has nothing to do with you, the Kunwa Holy Land is willing to apologize. Senior Yi, please come out and prove your innocence. Otherwise, the Grand Pure Palace will not let this matter rest." The Vice Palace Master of the Grand Pure Palace also threatened. Soon after, the Hunyuan sect, the Heaven Justice sect, the Hehuan Valley, and many other sects in the Eastern Ocean that were second only to the 4 superforces also expressed their stance and asked Yi Chen to speak. It was night. Many martial kings worked together to barge into Tianfeng City in an attempt to force Yi Chen to show himself. Yi Chen attacked. A sword swept across the sky and killed 8 martial kings instantly. The sword chi stretched for thousands of meters, and it was peerless. It caused the outside world to fall into dead silence. Only then did everyone realize that they were facing a martial saint who had killed the Patriarch of the Spiritual Ruins. At this moment, the Great Li dynasty that had been silent finally spoke. "Everyone, the Great Li dynasty will definitely investigate this matter to the end and give you an explanation." Under such a situation, many forces finally retreated. However, everyone knew that this was only a temporary calm. The undercurrent would only become more and more intense. Time passed in a flash. On the morning of the 3rd day, when the first ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds, Yi Chen brought the people from the King Mu fort on a flying boat. He tore through the clouds and headed straight for the Great Li capital. The so-called flying boat was designed by the mystic masters in the King Mu fort. It was more than 60 meters long and could accommodate up to 100 people at the same time without being crowded. This magic tool was engraved with rune formations. With mystic stones as energy, it could travel tens of thousands of kilometers a day. Apart from Mu Kaiwei and Zhe, there were also dozens of carefully selected guards from the King Mu fort. Since the King Mu fort could not be without a leader, King Mu, the fort master, could only stay in the fort. Along the way, Meng Meng and Jiu had a lot of fun. The little girl was initially hostile to Mu Kaiwei, but after Yi Chen's explanation that night, the little girl threw away her hostility. Yi Chen stood on the flying boat with his hands behind his back. He lifted his eyes and looked into the sky, How far is the Great Li capital from here? The Great Li capital is called Purple Abyss City. It's in the southern part of the Eastern Ocean, over 20,000 kilometers away from Tianfeng City. Mu Kaiwei stood side by side with him, her clothes fluttering in the wind as she said softly, "If nothing unexpected happens along the way, we'll only need half a day to get there." Jiu, who was in the distance, subconsciously looked over. Seeing the two of them bathing in the wind like a pair of immortals, the former could not help but sigh faintly. It would be great if young master could get together with young mistress. Yi Chen could not help but look sideways when he sensed the fragrance coming from beside him. He immediately saw a pink face that looked like a peach blossom. At that moment, Mu Kaiwei looked over as well. Their eyes met for a few seconds. Yi Chen's heart skipped a beat. He said after retracting his gaze, "Who's the strongest in the Great Li dynasty?" End of this chapter. Chapter 1133. She seemed to have sensed his embarrassment. Mu Kaiwei giggled and felt a little disappointed. However, she still said calmly, "The strongest must be Grand Tutor Ning." Grand Preceptor? Yi Chen was slightly stunned. A civil official? When he was in the northern region, in the great dynasties, there was a clear distinction between the civil and the military. Although the civil also practiced martial arts, their strength was not high. However, Mu Kaiwei said that the strongest person in the Dali dynasty was a civil official. "You don't know." Mu Kaiwei shook her head and said, "Grand Tutor Ning's status in Dali is very high, even surpassing that of the Emperor of Dali. He's known as the literary saint of his generation. It's said that Grand Tutor Ning isn't from the Tianfeng Sea area. He's from the middle ground." He lifted his hand and combed the hair on his forehead. "Zhongzhou?" Yi Chen was surprised. Zhongzhou was one of the 5 major regions of the ancient desolate realm. It was also a place Yi Chen had never been to. The first time he heard about it was from Empress Dowager Yun Yi of the northern region's great dynasty. "That's right, the central province," Mu Kaiwei said. "The ancient barren world is divided into 5 regions. The Eastern Barren Territory, the Northern Region, the Southern Region, the West Earth, and the Middle Ground. Strictly speaking, the Tianfeng Sea area is sandwiched between these 5 regions. The Middle Plains is known as the leader of the 5 major regions. It gathers the fate of the entire ancient barren world. It's not an exaggeration to call it a holy land." At this point, she paused and said, "In the central continent, there is a martial saint who can pull up a mountain with his bare hands, there is a wine-sword immortal who can descend upon the world with his sword, and there is also a literature saint who can speak the truth and communicate with the power of heaven and earth with his mortal body. In other words, Grand Tutor Ning of the Dali dynasty is a saint of literature from Zhongzhou." Yi Chen gradually came to a realization. That's right. It's said that when the current emperor of Dali was still the crown prince, he traveled to the Middle State and met Grand Tutor Ning, who was studying at Jixia Academy. Mu Kaiwei nodded and said, "Later on, Grand Tutor Ning chose to follow the emperor of Dali and came to the Tianfeng Sea area. This has been going on for 1,000 years. Jixia Academy? Yi Chen was secretly shocked. Any earthling with a little bit of culture would be very familiar with these 4 words. Jixia Academy was the earliest government-run institution of higher learning on Earth. It was also the earliest academy of social sciences and government think tank. It was built during the Warring States period by Duke Huan of Qi Tianwu. It was located near the Ji Gate in Linzi, the capital of Qi. It would not be an exaggeration to say that this school was the best school. In today's world, Yale and Harvard were nothing compared to it. This was because during the Spring and Autumn Warring States period, and even during the Qin dynasty, this school had produced many great people, including military strategists, politicians, thinkers, and even important founding ministers. For example, Mencius, Xuanzi, and the other founders of the Confucian school all came from Jixia Academy. In addition, there were also Chunyuqi, Zhou Zi, Zhou Yan, Tianpian, Shenzi, and so on. The prime minister of the Qin dynasty, Li Si, was a disciple of Sun Zi. However, after the first emperor ascended to the throne, he disliked the Confucian school and preferred the legalist school, so Li Si joined the legalist school. In short, Jixia Academy was the birthplace of the 100 schools of thought, including the Taoist school, Confucian school, legalist school, Famist school, military school, school of agriculture, school of Yinyang, and so on. Yi Chen's eyes flickered. It seems like the 9 saints betrayed Earth and came to the ancient desolate realm. They established Jixia Academy. Thinking to this point, he could not help but recall the grudge between Ying and the 9 schools. Moreover, Ying was now extremely powerful in the southern region. Sooner or later, the two sides would collide. He stared at Mu Kaiwei and asked tentatively, "What's the status of Jixia Academy in Zhongzhou?" "Supreme and supreme." Mu Kaiwei said softly. "Jixia Academy affects the entire ancient desolate realm and is known as the only Holy Land. Especially the head of the academy, Lord Chancellor, is rumored to be close to an immortal. His disciples are all over the world." Yi Chen nodded secretly. Thousands of years ago, the Xi clan in the Tianfeng Sea area was in trouble, and the human race was weak. Later on, it was said that after the Emperor of Dali ascended the throne, he appointed Grand Tutor Ning. Mu Tsaiwei's red lips parted slightly. Grand Tutor Ning has educated the people with poetry and books, regardless of their status. He has made shocking contributions to the strengthening of the human race, so everyone regards him as a literary saint. Even the leaders of the other 3 major forces have to respect him. Yi Chen smiled. If the Grand Tutor Ning you mentioned really has such a status, would the current Emperor of Dali tolerate him? As the Emperor of a generation, although he had the breadth of mind to embrace the 4 seas and all living things, he was still a god. However, he was often the most petty, because he could not tolerate anyone who could threaten his position or even challenge the imperial power. From the fact that the Great Li dynasty had implemented the vassal system and suppressed the feudal forces like the King Mu fort, it could be seen that the Emperor of Great Li was also a ruthless person. Then the problem was, how could he tolerate Imperial Tutor Ning's great reputation? "Actually, that's not true," Mu Kaiwei shook her head and said. "The current emperor trusts Grand Preceptor Ning greatly. The ruler and his officials are very harmonious. Even if someone in the imperial court slandered Grand Preceptor Ning, the emperor would directly strip that person of his title and official position." Interesting. Yi Chen smiled lightly. In his opinion, Emperor Dali and Grand Tutor Ning were a bit like King Zhou of Shang and Grand Tutor Wen during the Shang and Zhou dynasties. However, he did not know if this emperor of the Dali dynasty was King Zhou of Shang. Mu Kaiwei continued, "Grand Tutor Ning cultivates in fame and has long become a saint in literature. Rumor has it that his words can kill any evil demon. His calligraphy has suppressed many members of the Xi clan. It's no wonder that such a person can become the Great Li dynasty's #1. Yi Chen nodded lightly. Then, the atmosphere between the two of them became silent. Mu Kaiwei turned around and looked at Meng Meng, who was playing with Jiu'er with her beautiful black eyes. She smiled sincerely. This child is quite smart. After interacting with her for the past few days, she had really fallen for Meng Meng, even though the latter had been hostile to her before. Yi Chen looked at his daughter with doting eyes. "She's not just smart, she's too smart." "Where's her mother?" Mu Kaiwei suddenly asked. The smile on Yi Chen's face froze, as if he was unwilling to mention it. The former's eyes dimmed and she said softly, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. Actually, it's nothing." Yi Chen shook his head and said, "Her mother has gone missing. To be honest, I brought her here to look for my wife." "Missing?" Mu Kaiwei was stunned at first, then she said guiltily, "I'm sorry. If there's anything you need, just tell me. The King Mu fort will definitely do our best." Yi Chen nodded lightly and said nothing. He lifted his head to look at the boundless sea below. He had a feeling that there would definitely be some unexpected gains on this trip to the Dali dynasty. Time passed bit by bit. That afternoon, the flying boat arrived at the human city. From afar, everyone could see many towering cities towering below, surrounded by magnificent light screens of formations. "We're here." Mu Kaiwei walked over and said softly, "This is the outer city of Ziyuan City. 100 kilometers ahead is the capital." End of this chapter. Chapter 1134. The Great Li Dynasty was one of the 4 superpowers of the East Sea in the Tianfeng Sea area. It was located in the most fertile land in the East Sea. There were more than 10 states within its territory, and its territory covered hundreds of thousands of kilometers. There were billions of people. Yi Chen lifted his head and looked over. He saw fertile land that stretched for thousands of kilometers. There were strange flowers and plants, spiritual springs, and strange stones everywhere. The nearby mountains were spewing spiritual energy, and there were faint dragon veins surging into the city. "It's stronger than the northern region." Yi Chen secretly shook his head. After his observation over the past few days, he realized that the northern region was much weaker than the Tianfeng Sea area. If a major dynasty were to go against the Great Li Dynasty, it would be like an ant trying to shake a tree. At the same time, all sorts of flying beasts flew past in the surrounding sky and landed less than 3,000 meters away from the city. On these flying beasts were all sorts of people in strange clothes. There were even existences that had cultivated to become spirits, and they did not hide their auras at all. Mu Kaiwei said in a low voice, "Looks like these are all people who came to participate in the Emperor's birth. There are even forces from the West Sea, the South Sea, the North Sea, and even the Sea Clan. Let's land." Yi Chen said. Mu Kaiwei nodded and walked to the back of the flying ship. She ordered the person controlling the flying ship to land. "Wow, is this the capital? This is my first time coming to the capital." As soon as they landed, Jiu'er widened her eyes like a curious baby as she sized up everything. Her eyes were filled with shock. Meng Meng, who was in her arms, said angrily, "Ignorant woman, little girl, who are you calling ignorant?" Jiu'er immediately started fighting with her. The bickering between the two of them attracted the attention of many people in the surroundings. When they saw Mu Kaiwei and Jiu'er, many people were stunned. They were all stunned by the two women's appearances, but they did not dare to talk to them due to their courage. Just when Yi Chen was about to bring them into the city, a gentle voice came from the side. "Fairy, I'm Wang Xiling from the Heavenly Sword sect. May I know who you are?" Then, a young man in white with a long sword on his back slowly walked over. The young man was only 24 or 25 years old, and he had an extremely handsome face. As his voice fell, there were a lot of gasps in the surroundings. The Heavenly Sword sect was a rank 7 sect in the Western Sea of the Heavenly Wind Sea region. As for this Wang Xiling, he could be considered to be somewhat famous in the Western Sea. Hearing the exclamations from the surroundings when he announced his name, the white-clothed Wang Xiling's smile became even more brilliant. Among Yi Chen's group, Mu Kaiwei was the most eye-catching. Her facial features were beautiful and her temperament was otherworldly. Therefore, he could not help but stand up and try to chat with her. Mu Kaiwei looked at him coldly and said coldly, "Get lost." Being reprimanded like this in front of so many people, Wang Xiling's complexion faintly became a bit unsightly. "Miss, I don't have any evil intentions. Why did you speak so harshly? Could it be that you are looking down on my Heavenly Sword sect?" At this point, the two old men behind him took a step forward, and their auras locked onto Mu Kaiwei. Boom! At that moment, the dozens of guards of the King Mu fort also took a step forward and fought against them. The expressions of the people around them could not help but change. They subconsciously took a few steps back, afraid that they would be implicated. "You're right. However, how can a mere rank 7 sect like the Heavenly Sword sect enter Ms. Mu's eyes?" At this moment, a magnetic voice exploded in everyone's ears. Tap, tap, tap. Immediately after, the sound of hurried horse hooves came from the city, and there seemed to be the sound of wheels grinding on the ground. Everyone turned around and saw a carriage made of pure gold coming from the city. The curtains of the carriage were drawn, and only an old man with a face full of wrinkles was holding the horse. Just as Wang Xiling was about to flare up, all the soldiers guarding the city knelt down on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Your Highness King Zhao." The entire place instantly fell silent, and a few words echoed in their minds. King Zhao. Without a doubt, the person was definitely the third prince of the Great Li dynasty. In the entire Great Li dynasty, only he had the title of King Zhao. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, even more people knelt down on one knee and shouted, "We pay our respects to Your Highness King Zhao." Only Yi Chen and the rest, as well as a few people, remained where they were. Wang Xiling swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Shock flashed through his eyes. There was no more sound in the carriage. Everyone could only continue kneeling as they watched the carriage rush out of the city gate. Subsequently, it stopped less than 10 steps away from Yi Chen and the rest. As the curtain was lifted, a young man in snow-white clothes walked out. The young man's face was angular. Although he was young, he gave off a steady and dignified vibe. The young man in snow-white clothes landed softly. He ignored everyone and walked straight to Mu Kaiwei and Yi Chen. When he passed by Wang Xiling's face turned pale. He almost lost his balance as he said with a trembling voice, King Zhao, the Great Li Emperor, had more than 10 sons in his life, but the most outstanding ones were the first prince, the second prince, the third prince, and the 7th princess. The 4 of them were talented and had reached martial king stage at a young age. They were comparable to the masters of many forces. Meanwhile, Wang Xiling was only a martial ancestor stage cultivator. How could he face the third prince's dignity head-on? However, the young man in snow-white clothes did not even look at him. After brushing past him, he smiled at Yi Chen and Mu Kaiwei. "Ms. Mu, Senior Yi, I, Shang Tianxing, have been waiting for you for a long time." The moment that was said, everyone fell silent. The dignified third prince of the Great Li dynasty, an outstanding person of the current era, had personally come to welcome Yi Chen and the rest? Meanwhile, Wang Xiling was dumbfounded. Initially, he thought that Mu Kaiwei and the rest were just people from a small force, so he tried to provoke them. Who would have thought that he was touching a tiger's butt? Yi Chen had no expression on his face in the face of the third prince's enthusiasm. On the other hand, Mu Kaiwei bowed slightly and said politely, "How can I make the third prince come out of the city to welcome me?" The third prince smiled lightly. Just as he was about to speak, a cold voice came from the city again. "Third brother, you're quite well informed. You actually came out of the city to welcome me before I did." Then, an extremely luxurious palanquin was carried out by people. The person who responded to the person in the sedan chair was a deep voice, "Second brother, you're not inferior to me." Then, he saw countless guards dressed in uniforms, surrounding a canopy umbrella as they walked over. The soldiers guarding the city were shocked and said respectfully, "Greetings, Your Highness Prince of Yen, greetings, Crown Prince." Boom! These words caused everyone's hearts to tremble. Even the second prince and the crown prince were here. Mu Kaiwei's expression changed as well. Before deciding to attend the emperor's birthday, she had thought about the many situations she would face. However, she did not expect that the 3 princes would come out of the city to welcome them before they even entered the city. One had to know that casually participating in the battle for the throne was a great taboo. The slightest carelessness would lead to death. End of this chapter. Chapter 1135. Outside Ziyuan City. 2 men slowly walked over from the dignified yet low-key honor guard. One of them wore an official robe with a purple jade ring hanging from his waist. He looked middle-aged and serious, as if he could see through a person's heart. The other person was dressed like a young man. He held a feather fan in his hand and looked like an elegant scholar. He had a pair of faces that could intoxicate all women in the world. The two of them were the crown prince of the Great Li dynasty, Shang Tianming, and the second prince, Shang Tianlin. No matter where they went, they would cause a huge uproar, not to mention that the three princes were here in person. At this moment, all the passers-by at the city gate were kneeling on the ground with their heads lowered, not daring to breathe loudly. The second prince, Shang Tianlin, glanced at the third prince, Shang Tianxing, with a faint smile, and said like a spring breeze, "Third brother, you didn't inform us that Senior Yi has come to the capital city. You're really not loyal enough." The third prince, Shang Tianxing, bowed and smiled. "First brother, second brother, you're busy with work. How could I dare to disturb you?" "Nonsense." The second prince's face turned serious, and he pretended to be unhappy. "What kind of person is Senior Yi? Even if we're busy every day, we still have to take time out of our busy schedules to welcome him." After saying that, he glanced at Yi Chen intentionally and said again, "Third brother, you're clearly not taking Senior Yi seriously enough. Not only are you embarrassing us, but you're also embarrassing the royal family." The third prince's expression darkened slightly when he said that. Then, he said, "Second brother, you must be joking. Tianxing's respect for Senior Yi can be witnessed by the heavens and earth." The surrounding people remained silent. Mu Kaiwei secretly shook her head. It was no secret that the three princes were fighting openly and secretly for the throne. However, they did not expect the fight to reach such an extent. It could be said that every word was heartbreaking and every sentence was filled with killing intent. Yi Chen watched everything coldly from the sidelines. In the eyes of outsiders, the three of them might be noble descendants, but they were nothing in his eyes. Meanwhile, the three of them spoke of all sorts of respect in front of him and were secretly fighting each other. This method was truly unorthodox. Enough. Crown Prince Shang Tianming's face darkened when he saw that the second prince and third prince were still going to speak, and he berated, "Is there a need to be so noisy in front of Senior Yi?" He took a step forward after saying that and clasped his fists at Yi Chen. "Greetings, Senior Yi. Senior Yi must be tired from the journey. I've prepared a banquet to welcome you." As soon as he said that, everyone kneeling on the ground lifted their heads to look at Yi Chen. Disbelief filled their eyes. The dignified crown prince actually called a young man senior? His tone was still so respectful? Could it be that this person was an almighty who could retain his youthful looks? Senior Yi. Miss Mu, but at first, Prince Ling's mind was roaring. He suddenly recalled a person who had recently shaken the entire Tianfeng Sea area. That person seemed to be called Mad Southern Yi. He looked at Yi Chen immediately as he thought to this point. There was deep fear in his eyes. Yi Chen smiled faintly at Crown Prince Shang Tianming's good intentions. Just as he was about to speak, the second prince and the third prince took a step forward at the same time. The second prince smiled and said, "Senior Yi, I've also prepared a banquet for you. It's at the largest Feng Feng restaurant in the capital city. There's also singing and dancing. I obtained a mansion in my early years. It belongs to the famous landscape master, Master Shuha." The third prince was unwilling to be outdone as he said, "If Senior Yi doesn't mind, you can move there. I'll introduce some friends to Senior Yi." The crown prince and the second prince's expressions changed when they heard that. Clearly, they did not expect the third prince to be so generous. Meanwhile, the people around them could not help but perk up their ears. They seemed to be curious about what choice Yi Chen would make next. It was a battle between the three princes. If he chose one of them, he would definitely offend the other two. However, Yi Chen shook his head and said, "I appreciate your kindness, but I'm not interested. Please leave." Mu Kaiwei secretly heaved a sigh of relief when she heard that. Choosing none of them was the best choice. The three princes seemed to be unwilling. "Senior." Yi Chen's gaze turned cold. "I don't want to get involved in your mess, and I don't want to repeat myself." Only then did the three of them shut their mouths obediently. At that moment, the sound of horse hooves came from the city. Then, a donkey pulled a slightly shabby carriage out. The donkey was extremely thin and weak, as if it would collapse at any time. What was surprising was that it actually spoke human language as it pulled the carriage. Confucius said, "If you know it, if you don't know it, if you don't know it." The person in charge of driving the carriage was an old man. The old man was blind, and he was dressed very simply. In everyone's opinion, such an ordinary carriage would definitely stop after seeing the three princes' carriages. However, the carriage continued to advance. Instead, it was the three princes who ordered their men to clear a path for the shabby carriage. What shocked everyone the most was that the three princes bowed and cupped their fists, as if they were paying respects to the shabby carriage. Whoosh! The carriage stopped when it was less than 30 meters away from Yi Chen. After the blind old man got out of the carriage shakily, he walked to Yi Chen and said expressionlessly, "Mr. Yi, my master would like to see you." "Who's your master?" Yi Chen said while smiling lightly. The blind old man was neither servile nor overbearing. He said sparingly, "Master said that you'll know when you get there." "How can you be sure that I'll go?" The smile on Yi Chen's face remained. "Master said that you'll definitely go," the blind old man said slowly. The conversation between the two of them confused everyone. Even Mu Kaiwei, Juror, and the rest of the people from the King Mu fort were no exception. Just when everyone thought that Yi Chen would reject them, they heard him say while smiling, "All right. Yi Chen, I'll go with you." Mu Kaiwei hesitated. The blind old man said, "I'm sorry, my master only wants Mr. Yi. You guys can wait here. Someone will arrange things for you." Yi Chen walked over and carried his daughter from Juror's arms. He said, "Just listen to their arrangements. I'll look for you guys when the time comes." Mu Kaiwei could only nod. She was not worried that someone in the capital of Dali would dare to touch them without Yi Chen around. "Let's go." Yi Chen got into the shabby carriage and urged the blind old man while carrying his daughter. Before the blind old man could speak, the skinny donkey dragged the carriage and walked into the city. As it walked, it said, "Confucius said that learning and practicing is the same. Even animals cultivate scholarly fame?" Yi Chen was slightly surprised. The little girl in his arms seemed to have discovered a new continent. She stared at it with her jet-black eyes wide open. The blind old man only cared about driving the carriage, and did not say a word. The donkey was not angry at all. As it walked, it said, "Master, all living things in the world have spirituality. There is no discrimination. Why is it that only humans can raise themselves through poetry and books? This is called separation." End of this chapter. Chapter 1136. At the same time, in the Dali Imperial Palace, in the Imperial Garden, the Emperor of Dali, who was dressed splendidly, was holding a bucket of bait in his hand, quietly feeding the fish in the water. Behind him, a man in black knelt on one knee, as if he was saying something. The Emperor of Dali paused and said, "Are you saying that the Crown Prince and the others came out of the city to welcome us?" "Yes, Your Majesty." The man in black did not dare to hide anything. "The Crown Prince, the second Prince, and the third Prince are courteous and tried their best to invite that person. Respect the wise? If I'm not mistaken, that person didn't agree, right?" The Emperor of Dali threw out a handful of bait. "That's right." The man in black said respectfully, "That person rejected right away, but that person left with Grand Preceptor Ning's people." "You don't understand?" The Emperor of Dali turned around and looked at him. The man in black prostrated, "I am slow-witted. The Grand Tutor is still too old-fashioned." The Emperor of Dali turned around and looked at the schools of fish fighting for food in the water. He said calmly, "It's been 1,000 years. The etiquette and music are about to collapse. The Grand Preceptor is still stubbornly sticking to that." The man in black did not dare to speak. After a while, the Emperor of Dali asked, "Tell me, in Dali, who is more powerful, me or the Grand Preceptor?" "I don't know." The black-clothed man's body trembled violently, and he was extremely terrified. "Say, if not for the Grand Preceptor back then, do you think I would have been able to conquer this land today?" "Your Majesty, spare my life." The black-clothed man almost fainted. Forget it. The Emperor of Dali seemed to be a little dispirited. After throwing the last bait, he turned around and left. Not long after he left, the entire imperial garden collapsed with a loud bang, and all the living creatures turned into dust on the carriage. Yi Chen looked at the donkey that was pulling the carriage. He was getting more and more interested. "I can't believe it knows what it means to be divided." The so-called separated mind was the psychology of Buddhism. It referred to the unfairness of the heart and the inability to treat all living beings equally. There was a difference between good and evil, good and bad, close and distant. The donkey shook its big ears and said rather proudly, "Tong Tong knows a lot. These were all taught by my master. Your name is Tong Tong?" The cute little baby in Yi Chen's embrace finally could not help but ask. It was not that the little fellow had never encountered an animal that could talk, such as Little Black, but it was her first time seeing an animal that could read. "Yes, Tong Tong is the name my master gave me." "What's your name?" the donkey replied. The little girl struggled in Yi Chen's embrace. She said excitedly as if she had met someone her age, "My name is Yi Meng Meng. You can call me Meng Meng." "Meng Meng, do you know how to read?" the donkey asked. The little fellow shook her head repeatedly. "I don't like studying. I hate studying. Besides, I'm still in kindergarten." "What is a kindergarten?" The donkey's swaying ears paused for a moment. It was incomparably astonished. "I've only heard of elementary school, Imperial College." After saying that, it said in a meaningful tone, "You have to read more. My master said that reading can open one's mind. I studied with my master for decades, and I also studied at the Imperial College for a few years. Later, I became the top scholar, but my master still thinks that I have too little knowledge." "Top scholar?" Yi Chen's expression froze slightly as he said in surprise, "You're a top scholar?" "That's right. That was decades ago. At that time, it was the time for the imperial examinations." The donkey said with lingering fear, "My master chased me out and asked me to participate in the imperial examinations. He said that if I couldn't become the top scholar, he would kill me to go with wine." Yi Chen looked at the little girl in his embrace, his expression a little unnatural. The ancient imperial examinations were much more difficult than the current college entrance examination. However, a beast had suppressed all humans and become the top scholar. As for the daughter in his arms, Su Yuhan usually asked her to study as if she was killing her. Seemingly sensing Yi Chen's ugly expression, Meng Meng stuck her tongue out and said in dissatisfaction, "Is the top scholar very powerful? Let me test you. Do you know what pi is?" "Pi?" The donkey's hooves paused and it turned around to look at her. "What's pi?" Even the blind old man could not help but prick up his ears. Yi Chen did not know whether to laugh or cry. Although the little girl was in kindergarten, her memory had long surpassed that of ordinary people because she ate his medicinal pills like candy. Perhaps ordinary high school students did not know as much as she did. "You don't even know pi?" As expected, the little girl's face was full of pride. Pi is the ratio of the circumference of a circle to the diameter. It's equal to the product of infinite fractions, which is about 3.141592654. The donkey's eyes were blank. Circumference? Diameter? Fractions? Multiplication? Accumulation? Let me test you again. The little girl smiled slyly. "Do you know what Goldbach's conjecture is?" Goldbach's conjecture. The donkey was at a loss again. "What is that?" The little girl shook Yi Chen's arm happily. Goldbach's conjecture was proposed by a great mathematician. Any integer greater than 2 can be written as the sum of 3 prime numbers. Integer? Prime numbers? The donkey was dumbfounded again. It thought it was knowledgeable, but it had never heard of such things. The little girl stuck her tongue out and said, "What's 1 plus 1? I know this. I've learned arithmetic. It's equal to 2. The donkey secretly sighed in relief. How do you know it's equal to 2? How can you prove it? The little girl was persistent. Of course, it's equal to 2 according to the saint. Who is the saint? A mathematician or a physicist? Did he prove that 1 plus 1 is equal to 2? What about the proof formula? The donkey looked up at the sky. It was doubting life. Yi Chen looked at it sympathetically. Before this, it was a genius, but it was completely tricked by the mischievous little girl. Thinking to this point, he could not help but pinch the little girl's face. All right, don't make things difficult for me. Is it appropriate for a modern person to bully an ancient person? The blind old man glanced at the meditating donkey and could not help but urge, "Let's go." Although that was what he said, his lips could not stop moving. Fortunately, I didn't show off my knowledge earlier. Otherwise, I would have embarrassed myself. When I get back, I must ask Master what pi is, what is circumference, diameter, and why 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Thinking to this point, he regained his previous calmness. Master is a saint who governs the world. He's learned from ancient and modern times. He must know, right? The donkey, which was confused by the little girl's series of questions, walked very slowly. It took about an hour to reach its destination. It was a field that looked like an ancient mountain village. Smoke curled up from the chimneys, chickens crowed, and dogs barked. The only difference was that the villagers were all dressed in Confucian robes. Some of them were farmers holding scriptures in their hands, while some were manure pickers. "Master, we're here." The donkey finally stopped in front of a wooden door. End of this chapter. Chapter 1137. After Yi Chen carried his daughter out of the car, he lifted his head and looked around. He saw that the wooden door in front of him was only 50 square meters wide. It was very shabby, as if it could not withstand the wind and rain. Behind the wooden door was a vegetable field. What was planted was nothing more than grains and the like. "This way, sir." The blind old man led Yi Chen through the wooden door. After walking for about 2 kilometers, they saw a pond. Lotus flowers were blooming on the pond, and fish were jumping around. In the center, there was a lone boat quietly. On the lone boat, one could vaguely see a figure in a straw raincoat sitting on the edge of the boat. He did not move at all, as if he was fishing. The blind old man found a boat and ordered Yi Chen and the rest to board it. He then rowed towards the lone boat. As the distance between them shortened, the face of the figure on the lone boat gradually became closer. It was a middle-aged scholar dressed in cotton clothes. He held a long rod in his hand, and a thin fishing line went straight into the water. What was surprising was that there was no hook or bait on the fishing line. Even so, there were still schools of fish gathered under the fishing line. "Master!" The donkey walked over while huffing and puffing. It said in a muffled voice, "What exactly is 1 plus 1? Without waiting for the middle-aged scholar to speak, it seemed as if it could not hold back any more and poured out all the beans. Also, what is pi? What is the circumference of a diameter? The moment he said that, even the blind old man looked at the middle-aged scholar curiously. Bang! A ruler suddenly appeared in the middle-aged scholar's hand and hit the donkey's head heavily. "You're already so impetuous after going out. Copy the scriptures 100 times as punishment." "Oh!" The donkey rubbed the huge bump on its head and let out an aggrieved "oh." Then, like a magic trick, it took out a brush and paper and started copying. Even so, it could not stop mumbling, "What exactly is 1 plus 1? The blind old man was once again glad that he was not the first to ask. He looked at the middle-aged scholar with a strange expression. "Don't tell me you don't know either, master? Idiot, get lost and copy it." As if he had heard the mutter of the donkey, he struck it again with the ruler, and another bruise appeared on its forehead. Yi Chen put down the little girl who could not hold back in his embrace and said, "Go play with them. I'll call you when I leave." Only then did the little fellow and the donkey follow the blind old man to board the small boat and row towards the shore. Suddenly, there were only 2 people left on the boat. The middle-aged scholar sat down again and quietly held the fishing rod in his hand. Without turning his head, he said, "You came for the ancient ship, right?" Yi Chen's eyes focused as soon as he said that. Clearly, he did not expect the other party to be so direct and reveal his intention right away. Thinking of this, he stared at her. "Do you know about the ghost ship?" "Not only do I know about the ghost ship, but I also know that you are not from the ancient barren world. You are from the celestial burial planet." As his voice fell, a wave of killing intent suddenly erupted in the heavens and the earth, enveloping an area of 3,000 meters. It was Yi Chen. Even though his temperament was no longer steady, he could no longer suppress the killing intent in his heart. This was the first person who had revealed his identity since he arrived in the ancient barren world. It was one thing for the other party to know, but he was so calm, giving off an unfathomable feeling. "You shouldn't have come here." Under the killing intent, the middle-aged scholar did not move at all, as if he was not affected at all. "The spirit ruins grotto heaven has been destroyed, the sword head of Nine Yang and the palace master of Tai Ching Palace have disappeared, the Great Li dynasty is the strongest, and the Eastern Sea is in panic at this time. We are facing the Emperor's birthday. Powerhouses from all over the Southern Sea and Northern Sea will arrive. It can be said that undercurrents are surging, and blood is surging." Yi Chen looked at him quietly when he heard that. He suddenly smiled. "Aren't you the Grand Tutor of the Great Li dynasty? Why are you telling me this?" The middle-aged scholar put down the fishing rod and turned around to look at him carefully. He said word by word, "Because I can sense the little princess aura on you, Qian." Yi Chen's eyes focused. The middle-aged scholar's gaze softened when he heard that. "Looks like you've indeed seen the little princess. Who exactly are you?" Yi Chen spread his divine consciousness and sealed the surrounding space. He said coldly, "I suggest you don't do this with me. Otherwise, you might not be able to walk out of this place today." The middle-aged scholar smiled faintly. "I'm the Grand Tutor of the Great Li dynasty now, but I was the son of the Grand Tutor of the Great Qin Empire 1,000 years ago." "The Grand Tutor of the Great Qin Empire?" Yi Chen was moved. The so-called Grand Tutor began in the Western Zhou dynasty. He was the assistant minister of the imperial court and the teacher of the emperor. He was in charge of the formulation and promulgation of etiquette. Together with the Grand Commandant and the Grand Tutor, they were known as the Three Dukes. "This Great Qin is not that Great Qin." Grand Tutor Ning shook his head slightly and said, "The Great Qin on the celestial burial planet has long been destroyed by the remnants of the 6 nations and the saints of the 9 schools. I'm talking about the Great Qin that was established in the ancient desolate realm by young Master Fusu's descendants, an old subordinate." As soon as he said that, most of the doubts that Yi Chen had accumulated in his heart were gone. No wonder he saw the words "Long live the Great Qin Empire" on the ancient desolate realm's stone tablet. No wonder the undead on the ghost ship called Qianqian the Little Princess. Thinking to this point, he frowned and said, "Qianqian is Fu Su's descendant?" Fu Su was the eldest son of the first emperor of the Qin Empire. He was considered by countless courtiers to be the most suitable successor to the throne. However, Fu Su was pure, upright, and benevolent. He was disliked by Li Si and Zhao Gao. After the first emperor died of illness, Zhao Gao changed the edict and made Hu Hai take the throne, forcing Fu Su to commit suicide. Later generations had also studied Fu Su, but there was insufficient evidence. There were many theories about Fu Su's wife and descendants. The most accepted one was that Fu Su's son was Prince Qin's Xing, also known as the third king of Qin. After the death of the second king of Qin, Hu Hai, Zhao Gao supported Xing as the third king. However, Xing was killed when Xiang Yu led his army into Xianying City for more than 40 days. No. Grand Tutor Ning shook his head and said, "The little princess isn't young Master Fusu's biological daughter. She was adopted before young Master Fusu passed away." At that time, the little princess was still an infant. Yi Chen's eyes flickered slightly. In that case, the middle-aged couple on the ghost ship was not Qianqian's parent. They should be the old subordinates of the great Qin Empire. However, what puzzled him was who was that crazy Taoist. Even with such strength, the Kunlun ruins had slaughtered the ghost ship. After young Master Fu Su died, our old subordinates brought the little princess to hide. We used the flying ship created by the Heavenly Craftsman clan to come to the ancient desolate realm, Grand Tutor Ning recalled. We were the first to come to the ancient desolate realm. Many of our old subordinates wanted to rebuild the great Qin Empire and call it the later Qin Empire in an attempt to counterattack in the future. Who would have thought that a few hundred years later, the saints of the 9 schools and the remnants of the 6 countries would also descend upon the ancient desolate realm? At this point, his eyes were filled with sorrow. The remnants of the 9 schools and the 6 countries joined forces with the natives of the ancient desolate realm to attack the later Qin Empire. Countless people died, and blood flowed like rivers. Yi Chen could not help but say, "Then, some of them brought Qianqian back to the celestial burial planet while the rest hid?" End of this chapter. Chapter 1138. That's right. After our later Qin was destroyed, there were internal disagreements. Some people wanted to lie low and wait for an opportunity. Grand Preceptor Ning sighed and said, "A portion of them completely gave up and surrendered to the enemy in an attempt to preserve their lives. A small number of them were unwilling to fail and brought the little princess back to the celestial burial planet." Yi Chen secretly nodded. It seemed like Grand Tutor Ning was one of the people who were hiding. Thinking to this point, he asked, "Did those few people leave through a large warship?" "Yes." Grand Preceptor Ning nodded slightly and said, "That warship was built by the Heavenly Craftsman race. At that time, it was the Gan Yu couple from the Heavenly Craftsman race that accompanied it." He could not help but look at Yi Chen. "You have the little princess aura on you. I believe you've met Gan Yu and his wife, haven't you? The Heavenly Craftsman clan, the Gan Yu couple?" The doubt in Yi Chen's eyes dissipated a lot more. In that case, the middle-aged couple who were protecting Qianqian on the ghost ship were Gan Yu and his wife. "Never seen him before." He shook his head. "To tell you the truth, after this warship returned to the celestial burial planet, it was massacred. Gan Yu, his wife, and hundreds of guards died, and the warship became a ghost ship." He continued, "As for Qianqian, she was taken away by a crazy Taoist." "Who is that crazy Taoist?" "He's called Elder Xian. In fact, this person's background is very special. Even though we are old ministers of the later Qin dynasty, we don't know much about him." Grand Preceptor Ning's eyes were filled with sorrow. Rumor has it that Mr. Fu Su had once brought a group of people to explore a historical remnant, and after coming out of the historical remnant, this person followed beside him. This person came from a relic? Could it be an almighty who was resurrected from the ruins? Yi Chen frowned slightly. Before this, he had guessed the identity of the crazy Taoist who took Su Yuhan away more than once. However, he did not expect him to be from the ruin. Elder Xian only listens to young Master Fu Su. Before young Master Fu Su passed away, he asked him to protect the little princess. Grand Tutor Ning said quietly, "The only thing we know is that Elder Xian's strength is terrifying. I'm afraid he has already surpassed Martial Sage and reached Martial Emperor realm." Surpassing Martial Saint? Martial Emperor stage? Yi Chen was shocked. After fighting with the Patriarch of the Spirit Ruins, he had figured out the combat power of a Martial Saint. It was equivalent to the nascent soul realm in the cultivation world. If he had many tricks up his sleeves, perhaps only a late-stage nascent soul realm cultivator could fight him. He had only recovered to the nascent soul initial stage, and he was only able to kill him by relying on the strength of his physical body and his soul formation stage divine sense. Above the Martial Saint realm is the Emperor realm. Grand Preceptor Ning sighed faintly. It's just that Elder Xian's mental state has always been muddle-headed, and his fighting strength is unstable. We can only guess. Yi Chen's eyes flickered as he said, "A year ago, a ghost ship stepped into the Tianfeng Sea area and was attacked by the 4 super forces. Do you know about that?" "I know." Grand Tutor Ning nodded slowly. "I also know that the little princess and Elder Xian are on this ghost ship. Other than them, there are a man and 2 women." He could not help but look at Yi Chen. "If I'm not mistaken, this man and 2 women are your wife and parents, am I right?" Yi Chen's expression turned grim as he said, "Since you're an old subordinate of the Qin dynasty, why did you watch them be trapped in danger? What do you think of my relationship with the Dali dynasty?" Grand Tutor Ning smiled and asked. Yi Chen said, "Outsiders regard you as the literary saint of the Dali dynasty. There are rumors that you're on good terms with the Dali dynasty's emperor and his ministers, and that you share the same ideals, ha ha ha." Grand Tutor Ning suddenly burst out laughing. What a harmonious monarch and minister, what a congenial aspiration! He looked at Yi Chen and said firmly, "Do you know where the people of later Qin are? This is the Heaven-Wind Sea region." His clothes fluttered. The country collapsed, and the people of Old Qin either died or fled. They fled to this desolate land where the sea races ravaged the Tianfeng Sea region to survive. Among the billions of people in the Tianfeng Sea area, 1/3 of them are the descendants of the Qin people. Yi Chen's heart jolted slightly, and his gaze slowly softened. "In other words, you're trying to protect the Qin people's descendants?" On the way here, he had learned from Mu Kaiwei that the Tianfeng Sea area was originally the world of the Sea clan, and even the Dali dynasty had to live among them. Later on, after the current emperor of Dali returned from his trip to Zhongzhou, he built a new world for Dali with Grand Tutor Ning's help. It could be said that Grand Tutor Ning had suppressed countless sea clans and won the current living situation for the humans of the Tianfeng Sea area. Shang Wudao promised me that he would treat the people of the world well and the descendants of the Qin people well. Grand Tutor Ning closed his eyes slightly, as if he was unwilling to look back. "A year ago, I learned that the ghost ship had appeared in the Tianfeng Sea area and tried to save the little princess. However," he smiled bitterly, "the Academy summoned me back at that time. The upper echelons of the Academy even personally sealed my 6 senses. This letter lasted for half a year. By the time this old man returned from the Learning Palace, the dust had already settled. The academy he was talking about was Jixia Academy." Yi Chen was silent for a few seconds before sighing. "In other words, you don't know the details of the battle a year ago? Even though Shang Wudao hid it from me, I still found some clues." Grand Tutor Ning took a deep breath in and said slowly, "There were a total of 20 saints in that battle. Most of them came from the 9 schools and the 6 kingdoms." 20? Yi Chen's eyes froze when he heard that. Even he had no chance of winning against such terrifying combat power. Grand Tutor Ning sneered. "Among these 20 people, 5 of them were experts from the Qin Empire who came to support us. Even so, Old Xian still killed 8 of them. What happened after that?" Yi Chen's heart was in turmoil. "I don't know what happened after that," Grand Tutor Ning said with a lonely expression. "The only thing I know is that Old Xian lost this battle. The 5 saints of the great Qin Empire, who had been hiding for a long time, died on the spot. The little princess and the rest have also disappeared." He shook his head with difficulty. "However, I'm sure that they're not dead. They're in Zhongzhou." "Zhongzhou, huh?" Yi Chen immediately felt much more enlightened. As long as he was in Zhongzhou, his direction was clear. At that moment, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. He immediately looked at the former and said, "Do you know about the first emperor? Why are you mentioning the incapable ruler?" Grand Tutor Ning looked a little unhappy. "The reason why we ended up like this is because of the incapable ruler." Yi Chen said, "I heard that he appeared in the southern region. He seemed to have stirred up a monstrous killing intent." "Of course." Grand Tutor Ning snorted coldly. "The incapable ruler is settling accounts. Those who died in his hands all had enmity with the great Qin Empire back then. At this point, a hint of hatred appeared in his eyes. Most importantly, the incapable ruler is trying to find his avatar and successfully cultivate the three pure ones. Chapter 1139. His avatar is in the ancient desolate realm? Yi Chen's expression finally changed a little. He had long since seen that the first emperor cultivated the three pure ones technique. He separated the jade body, the evil body, and the avatar. The ing that he knew was the evil body. If the jade body, the evil body, and the avatar were all merged into one, even Yi Chen would have a headache by then. Of course. Grand Tutor Ning said. Back then, he wanted to cultivate the three pure ones technique crazily, but he failed. The jade body died on the spot, and the evil body was suppressed by the 9 schools on the celestial burial planet. As for the avatar, it was brought to the ancient desolate realm. Yi Chen came to a realization. Earth and the ancient desolate realm were far apart. The 9 schools separated the evil body and the avatar completely to prevent the first emperor from recovering completely. It's getting late. You should go back. Grand Tutor Ning stood up at that moment and looked straight at Yi Chen. He said, I admit that you're talented, but don't be too ostentatious in the ancient desolate realm. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. As for the birth of this son. He paused for a moment and said hesitantly, It's better if you don't participate. The Emperor of Dali isn't as simple as you think. Even though I've been with him for 1,000 years, I don't dare to say that I really understand him. If there's any news about the ghost ship in the future, please let me know. Yi Chen clasped his fists at him. As soon as he said that, he removed the seal on the surrounding space. With a flash, he rushed to the shore. The donkey from before was standing under a crooked locust tree. It was holding a tree branch in one of its hooves and drawing on the ground. Its body was covered in all kinds of mosquitoes. Even so, it could not be stopped. The ground was covered in dense mathematical formulas and equations, and they were all modern Arabic numerals. Teacher, I proved that 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. I proved that 1 plus 2 is equal to 3. Yi Chen saw it wake up when he passed by it. It ran to Meng Meng excitedly. The little girl coughed and said in an adult tone, Good disciple, well done. Keep it up. I believe in you, Sai. The donkey returned to its original spot to write mathematical formulas again. Yi Chen's face twitched slightly. He looked at the little girl and said, Not bad, Yi Meng Meng. You're just a kindergartner, but you've accepted a top scholar as your disciple. Daddy, it's the one who insisted on acknowledging me as its master. The little fellow playfully stuck out its tongue. Let's go back. Yi Chen shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He carried her in his arms while the blind old man walked over and led them away. From afar, he could hear all sorts of screams coming from behind him. Master, don't hit me anymore, I was wrong. Fool, let's go and copy some scriptures. Dali Dynasty in the rebuilt Imperial Garden. The Emperor of the Dali Dynasty stood with his hands behind his back. In front of him, there was a beautiful woman in revealing clothes bowing. Are you sure you heard me clearly? The Emperor of Dali asked. The gorgeous woman raised her head slightly, and fish scales could be seen at the corner of her eyes. Your Majesty, it's exactly the same. You can go now. When the gorgeous woman heard this, she immediately jumped into the water and turned into a goldfish, swimming along with the current. Grand Preceptor, why are you forcing me? The Emperor of Dali was expressionless, and his voice was extremely calm. I've already made my move. Let's see how you're going to deal with it. In the courier house of the Dali dynasty's capital, the blind old man brought Yi Chen to stand outside the courier house. He stopped and said, Mr. Yi, Ms. Mu and the rest have been arranged inside. Room number 17 of Building A. Yi Chen nodded lightly and walked into the courier house while carrying the little girl. After finding the room, he saw Jiu standing outside the door. Her fingers were tightly clasped as she paced back and forth. Her little face was filled with anxiety. "Young master, you're finally back." Jior welcomed him as soon as she saw him. Yi Chen glanced at the empty room and narrowed his eyes. "What happened?" "Not long after you left, someone invited my young mistress to a banquet. She didn't agree, but she was forcefully taken away," Jior said with bloodshot eyes. A ferocious gleam flashed through Yi Chen's eyes as soon as he heard that. "Where? Who took her away?" "It's at the Waterview Tower," Jior said. "Let's go." Yi Chen turned around immediately after saying that. 5 kilometers away from the north gate of the Dali dynasty's capital, there was an antique pavilion that rose from the ground. It had 9 floors, and it was very magnificent. Countless passers-by looked at the colossus in front of them with respect because it was the most luxurious restaurant in the capital, the Wave Viewing Tower. Ordinary people could not enter even if they had money. The people who entered were either officials above rank 5 or members of the royal family. The most terrifying person was the boss of the Wave Viewing Tower, who had never shown his face. It was rumored that even the crown prince and the others did not dare to cause trouble there. On the 6th floor of the Wave Viewing Tower, several old men stood respectfully at the side. Each of them had a dense aura, and they were all martial kings. The huge round table was currently filled with many people. Most of them were young men and women, and they were dressed in noble clothes. If one took a closer look, they would realize that these people were led by a young man in the middle. The young man was dressed in cold clothes, and his face was as feminine as a woman's. "Young Master Yaoyue, it's our fortune that you're able to come to the Dali dynasty, and it's also my fortune. I'd like to propose a toast to you." A young man sitting on the left slowly raised a cup of wine, stood up, and smiled at the feminine young man. If there were outsiders present, they would definitely realize that the young man who proposed a toast was the 5th prince of the Dali dynasty. Although his status was not as high as that of the 3 princes, he had been faintly favored in recent years. However, even though he was a prince, when facing the feminine young man, his tone was still polite, and he seemed to be trying to curry favor with him. "5th prince, you're too kind." Young Master Yaoyue smiled faintly, raised his cup, and drank it in one gulp. "Although the Greater One sect is located in the South Sea, we have been on good terms with the Dali dynasty for generations. This time, my father is in seclusion and cannot spare any time, so he sent me to congratulate you on your birthday." "Young Master Yaoyue, could it be that the Greater One Taoist Lord is cultivating some amazing magic?" a beautiful woman on the side asked in surprise. She was the Virgin of the Moon Clan of the North Sea. She looked charming and alluring, but she had reached the martial king level at a young age. The Moon Clan was in the North Sea, and its status was equivalent to that of the Dali dynasty. It still had a martial saint in it. "My father has just made some progress. It can't be said to be cultivating some amazing magic." Young Master Yaoyue shook his head slightly, then looked up at a young man in black beside him, and said, "Xiao Wu, I heard that you defeated the younger generation of all the sects in the West Sea? Well done." The young man in black bowed slightly, and said cautiously, "Brother Yaoyue, I was just playing around. It's not something to be proud of. Don't belittle yourself. The sect of Grains is the overlord of the West Sea, and its resources are not as good as the Greater One sect." Young Master Yaoyue shook his head slightly. At this time, an old man quickly walked over and whispered a few words in his ear. Young Master Yaoyue had a mocking look on his face. "Bring him here." Chapter 1140. The old man nodded and left in response. The surrounding people had clearly guessed something and could not help but reveal looks of anticipation. Only a few women had enmity in their eyes. Young Master Yao Yu looked at a young man sitting in the corner and said, "Xiling, sit over here." The young man called Xiling stood up instinctively. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, he could not help but feel nervous. However, he still gritted his teeth and sat beside young Master Yao Yu, calling out in awe, "Young Master! If Yi Chen was here, he would realize that the other person was the heavenly sword sex Wang Xiling that he had seen at the city gates. "I've brought her to you. You know what to do later." Young Master Yao Yu's expression was calm as he said, "In short, your heavenly sword sect cannot afford to lose face, and my greater one sect cannot afford to lose face even more." Wang Xiling's expression changed slightly when he heard this. Just as he was about to speak, he saw two old men walking in with a woman. It was Mu Kaiwei. However, at this moment, her dantian had been forcefully sealed, so she was no different from a weak woman. The room immediately fell silent. When they saw the woman's face clearly, many of the men present were stunned. One of the old men pushed Mu Kaiwei over, then said to young Master Yao Yu, "Young Master, I've brought her." Young Master Yao Yu looked at Mu Kaiwei with interest. "You're the so-called #1 beauty of the Tianfeng Sea area?" Mu Kaiwei looked up and was met with an extremely feminine man's face. The other party's gaze did not contain any lust, only coldness. She did not say a word, a cold smile on her face. However, an old man behind her suddenly released the pressure of a martial king. "Kneel when you see the greater one sex, young master." Boom! Mu Kaiwei felt a mountain-like pressure coming at her. Her body uncontrollably knelt on the ground as scarlet blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. "Raise your head." Young Master Yao Yu said indifferently. Mu Kaiwei was unmoved. However, someone forcefully lifted her face up. Mu Kaiwei glared at young Master Yao Yu, still not saying a word. However, her eyes were filled with unyielding will. Young Master Yao Yu pretended not to see her. After sizing her up, he said, "She is quite pretty. No wonder I call her the #1 beauty of the heavenly wind sea region. I think you must be very curious and angry right now. Why did I order people to bring you here?" He carefully played with the wine in his hands, then pointed at Wang Xiling beside him. "Let me introduce someone to you, Wang Xiling, from the Heavenly Sword Sect. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Sword Sect is a subsidiary sect of my Greater One Sect, and Wang Xiling has trained with me before." Wang Xiling lowered his head, not daring to look at Mu Kaiwei. "So what?" Mu Kaiwei finally spoke. "Good question." Young Master Yaoyue was slightly startled, clearly not expecting that she would dare to question him. He smiled and said, "An hour ago, Ziling met you outside the city. He just wanted to get to know you. But you told him to get lost." He slowly took out a handkerchief and gently wiped his slender fingers. "I don't like such actions." Hee. Mu Kaiwei suddenly laughed. Yao Yu frowned. "What are you laughing at?" Mu Kaiwei looked straight at him and said with a cold smile, "Then what do you want? Kill me?" Impudent. Just as she finished speaking, a woman on the seat stood up and slapped her. She berated, "Little bitch, do you know who's in front of you? The young master of the Greater One Sect, young Master Yaoyue." She slapped him. A red mark immediately appeared on Mu Kaiwei's face, but her expression did not change at all. "Little bitch, how dare you glare at me? Do you know who I am?" The woman was furious. "Enough." Young Master Yaoyue stopped her and looked down at Mu Kaiwei from above. "You do have some character. I know that your King Mu Fort won first place in the Eastern Ocean 100 Sect competition. I also know that there's a martial saint standing behind your King Mu Fort. I also know that this martial saint once killed the patriarch of the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven." He spoke confidently as if he was familiar with everything. "In the eyes of outsiders, these might not be enough to touch you, but to me, it's not enough." Mu Kaiwei's expression finally changed. She did not expect the young man before her to know so much about her. He even dared to order someone to capture her even though he knew that Yi Chen was here. This meant that the other party had a terrifying background. Young Master Yaoyue saw the change in her expression, and he said with a faint smile, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. I only captured you today to give Xiling an explanation. You only need to kowtow to Xiling and apologize. I'll naturally let you go after that." Young Master Yaoyue stared at Mu Kaiwei, What do you think? Young master, why don't we forget it? Wang Xiling braced himself and said, There's only a misunderstanding between Ms. Mu and me. There's no enmity between us. Just as he was about to say something, he saw young master Yao Yue's cold smile and immediately shut his mouth, not daring to say another word. Mu Kaiwei smirked coldly. You want me to kowtow and apologize? What right do you have? She actually asked me what right do I have? Young master Yao Yue smiled and looked up at the crowd. Everyone laughed along with him. Little b asterisk tch. Do you really think that you have nothing to fear just because you have a martial saint behind you? The woman who slapped Mu Kaiwei earlier smirked and said, There's a difference between martial saints too. Trash like the Spirit Ruins patriarch merely exhausted his potential and forcefully advanced. Ms. Mu, you might not know this, but the Spirit Ruins patriarch once ignorantly barged into the North Sea's moon sect, but he was chased by Shen Man's grandfather for 100,000 kilometers like a stray dog. The black-clothed young man from the West Sea Valley God's Gate said. Shen Man smiled proudly and looked at Mu Kaiwei coldly. Little b asterisk tch. Did you hear what Gu Jianwu said? If you know what's good for you, kneel down now. Otherwise, I'll scratch your face and turn you, the number one beauty, into the number one ugly woman. Even the Great Li dynasty's fifth prince could not help but say, Ms. Mu, you'd better do as he says. Even if that Mr. Yi behind you finds out about this, he won't dare to stand up for you. Young Master Yao Yue watched all of this calmly and said, Ms. Mu, what do you think? You'd better kill me. Mu Tsaiwei's gaze was firm. She clenched her fists and said word by word, Once I leave alive, it'll be the end of the sect behind you sooner or later. As soon as she said that, everyone was shocked. A few seconds later, violent killing intent surged. The warm smile on young Master Yao Yue's face gradually froze. He then put down the wine glass in his hand heavily and said casually, Kill her. Let me do it. Shen Man, the Virgin of the Moon sect, smiled cruelly. Then, she reached out and grabbed Mu Tsaiwei's snow-white neck, lifting her entire body into the air. Little b asterisk tch. I'm going to scratch your face piece by piece and let you experience what it means to, she laughed jealously. However, at the next moment, she screamed and the right hand that was grabbing Mu Tsaiwei's neck suddenly exploded, turning into a mist of blood. Chapter 1141. My hand, my hand! Shen Man fell to the ground as if she had turned into a female ghost. Her voice was almost hysterical, and blood splattered from her right arm. This sudden scene caused everyone to be startled, after which, several elders stood in front of everyone to protect them. Mu Kaiwei stared blankly at the blood on her hand. Then, she suddenly turned around and looked at the entrance of the room. There was a trace of gentleness in her beautiful eyes. Young master, the person who came is no match for you. Be careful. An old man stood in front of young Master Yao Yue and stared fixedly at the entrance. All of you leave. Young Master Yao Yue smiled lightly. I think it's the martial saint behind the King Mu fort. As soon as he said that, everyone's expressions froze, and Wang Xiling's face suddenly turned extremely pale. Since you know of my existence, how dare you touch my people? A voice as cold as the coldest of the east slowly came from outside the door. Wang Xiling's legs went limp and he almost fell. He could not be more familiar with this voice. Immediately after, a cold young man with fluttering white hair slowly walked in from outside the door. His gaze was extremely cold, like two pieces of ice that would not melt all year round. With his appearance, the temperature in the entire room suddenly dropped. He was dragging a rope in his hand, and there were heads wrapped around the rope. Their eyes were wide open, as if they had died with grievances. Everyone in the room gasped when they saw this scene, and then they took a step back in unison. The reason being those heads belonged to the people guarding outside. Each of them was a martial king, but now their heads had been chopped off. Even young Master Yao Yue's expression was cold. He had predicted Yi Chen's existence, but he did not expect Yi Chen to be so brutal. He did not give himself any leeway at all. Under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen glanced around and landed his gaze on Mu Kaiwei. He then extended his left hand gently and said softly, "Come." Mu Kaiwei smiled sweetly. Tears gathered in her beautiful eyes as she walked toward Yi Chen slowly. No one dared to stop her. "How dare you cut off my arm? How dare you cut off my arm? Do you know who I am?" Shen Man, who was on the ground, shrieked and charged at Yi Chen in a frenzy. Her martial king cultivation base exploded. "I'll kill you. I must kill you." As the Virgin of the Moon Clan, her status was extremely high. Ever since she was young, she had always been the one bullying others. When had she ever been treated like this? Thus, he had already lost his mind. Boom! Yi Chen extended his hand and grabbed her neck. He lifted her up and said coldly, "Be *Tsich, who gave you the courage to touch my people? My grandfather is the ancestral patriarch of the Moon Clan. How dare you touch me?" Shen Man screamed. Yi Chen directly crippled her cultivation base and threw her to the ground. He lifted his head to look at Mu Kaiwei. "She slapped you once, so you'll return her 18 slaps. Slap her back." "Alright." Mu Kaiwei chuckled softly and slapped Shen Man's face. But the slap was loud and clear, and it could be heard as it landed on the ground. Shen Man roared madly with incomparable resentment. "Little bitch, how dare you hit me? Pa! Pa!" 9 slaps sounded in the room, and Shen Man's originally beautiful face was instantly beaten into a pig's head. The surrounding people watched this scene silently. They felt that their incomparably confident and superior hearts were being overturned. After Mu Kaiwei finished the last slap, she did not even look at Shen Man. She said to Yi Chen directly, "I'm done." "Alright." Yi Chen nodded lightly. His gaze when he looked at Shen Man again was extremely cold. He did not hide the killing intent in his eyes at all. Shen Man's body trembled violently. Clearly, she knew what Yi Chen was going to do. She wet her pants immediately. "Don't kill me. You can't kill him." Right at this moment, a cold voice sounded in the room. It was young Master Yaoyue who spoke. He looked straight at Yi Chen calmly. "Her grandfather is the patriarch of the North Sea's Moon sect. He was a saint 500 years ago." "So what?" Yi Chen said. Young Master Yaoyue narrowed his eyes. "Mad Southern Yi, I know that you're a martial saint and that you killed the patriarch of the Spirit Ruins. However, what you don't know is that the patriarch of the Spirit Ruins was only a saint 100 years ago." Kacha, before he could finish, the sound of a joint being crushed rang out in the silent room. Subsequently, Shen Man's throat was crushed and she fell heavily to the ground. Her eyes were wide open as a soul came out of her body. Just as she was about to escape, Yi Chen grabbed it and burned it with the fire. In an instant, the entire room fell into dead silence. The smile on young Master Yaoyue's face froze. The expression of the black-clothed young man from the West Sea, Gu Lianwu, changed slightly. He subconsciously wanted to escape through the window. Die. However, he was met with Yi Chen's cold gaze. Boom! In an instant, another cloud of blood mist appeared in the room. Yi Chen looked at young Master Yaoyue. A smile appeared on his cold face. "So what if I kill him?" Young Master Yaoyue said with a cold expression, "Nothing much. It's just that you will become the Moon Sect's must-kill target. Anyone related to you will not have a good ending." "You seem to be very confident?" Yi Chen walked toward the former step by step and said coldly, "You can't even protect yourself, and you dare to threaten me?" Young Master Yaoyue's expression was calm as he said with a faint smile, "It's easy for you to kill me, but I bet that you won't dare to kill me. Do you believe me?" "Senior Yi." At that moment, Wang Xiling suddenly knelt on the ground and cried, "All of this happened because of me. You can kill me, but you really can't kill the young master." Even the 5th prince of the Great Li dynasty stood up and said with a frown, "Mr. Yi, I'm the 5th prince of the Great Li dynasty, Shang Tianqing. You can't kill young Master Yaoyue." He actually began to threaten, I advise you not to act recklessly. Otherwise, you won't be able to control the consequences. Why can't I kill him? Yi Chen said with a faint smile. The fifth prince could not help but say with a smile, Young Master Yaoyue is the young master of the South Sea's Supreme One sect. His father is known as the number one in the Tianfeng Sea area. And? Yi Chen remained expressionless. The fifth prince said with a cold smile, Are you afraid? Most importantly, the fifth prince's mother is the leader of the largest sea clan in the Tianfeng Sea area, the Green WRM clan. He shook his head slightly and said, Don't even mention killing him. If you dare to touch a single hair on his head, you'll face the wrath of the Supreme One sect and the Green WRM clan. Believe me, you won't be able to bear it. Moreover, your woman isn't dead. She only suffered superficial injuries. He looked at Yi Chen as he said to this point, On the contrary, you should apologize to young Master Yaoyue now. Perhaps you can. Before he was done speaking, he realized that Yi Chen had lifted his head. Not only do I dare to kill him, but I also dare to kill you. P.S. The 4th chapter has been updated for today. I won't ask for votes anymore. I've said what I need to say. The next plot will be very exciting. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1142. Not only do I dare to kill him, but I also dare to kill you. In the Wei viewing tower, everyone was silent as they watched Yi Chen behead the fifth prince with one hand. Mu Kaiwei covered her mouth with her hand, feeling extremely bullied. That was the fifth prince of the Dali dynasty. While his status was not as high as that of the crown prince and the others, he was still the son of the emperor of Dali. Now that he was killed by Yi Chen in the capital of Dali dynasty, he did not even need to think to know what kind of earth-shattering turmoil it would cause. The confident smile on young Master Yaoyue's face gradually froze. He could not help but feel a trace of regret. Yes, he dared to kill even the fifth prince of the Dali dynasty. Who else would he not dare to kill? Whoosh! A ball of light shot out from the fifth prince's body. It was his soul, trying to escape. However, a tremendous suction force suddenly surged out of Yi Chen's sleeve and sucked the former into his sleeve. After he was done, Yi Chen turned around slowly and glanced at young Master Yaoyue. A mocking smile appeared at the corner of his lips. Isn't it time to settle the score between us? Young Master Yaoyue's heart immediately trembled. After that, his complexion turned pale and he took a step back. He was the son of the Southern Sea Greater One Sect Master. His father was the Greater One Dao Lord, and his mother was the patriarch of the Green Flood Dragon clan, known as the Green Flood Dragon Holy Mother. He thought that with such a background, no matter who dared to touch him, they would have to worry about the people behind him. However, at this moment, he had to admit that he had underestimated Yi Chen. He had underestimated Yi Chen's ruthlessness. He was even lawless and did not care about the consequences. Boom! Almost at that moment, the few martial kings beside him stepped out at the same time. They charged at Yi Chen with crazy expressions on their faces. Boiling primordial energy swept through the world. Young Master, leave quickly! They were going all out. Because once young Master Yaoyu died, they wouldn't survive either. Die! Facing the four martial kings who were fearless of death, the mockery at the corner of Yi Chen's lips did not diminish at all. He spread his divine consciousness that was on the soul formation stage. Bang, 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 bang! Suddenly, 4 bloody mists exploded in the air. The 4 martial kings died in an instant. Right after that, he walked towards young Master Yaoyu step by step. If you kill me, my father will not let you off. He is a 3-revolution martial saint and is known as the number 1 person in the Heaven Wind Sea area. At this moment, young Master Yaoyue was no longer as calm as before. As he retreated, his face was filled with fear. My mother is the Green Flood Dragon clan's clan leader. She is known as the Green Flood Dragon Holy Mother. Before he could finish speaking, Yi Chen grabbed him in his hand. His body collapsed completely, leaving behind a tiny person the size of a palm. That was his divine soul. The little person's face was full of fear, and he screamed, "My father already knows that I'm in danger, and he's on his way." Yi Chen's expression remained unchanged as he exerted force in his hand. However, the little person was not crushed by him. Instead, a purple gleam suddenly shot out of his body. The purple gleam enveloped him tightly, faintly forming an equal with Yi Chen. Bloodline imprint? Surprise flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. Subsequently, he opened his mouth and spat out a golden airflow. The golden airflow directly dispersed the purple glow. "Father, save me, save me!" Young Master Yaoyue's divine soul was in complete despair. This was the first time in his life that he had felt powerless despair and the aura of death. If he was given another chance, he would definitely not choose to attack Mu Kaiwei. However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. The moment the purple gleam was dispersed, a figure suddenly bloomed from young Master Yaoyue's divine soul. It seemed to be an old man, but his facial features were not well defined. He shouted, "Fellow cultivator, let's talk things out. If my son has done anything wrong, I can." Yi Chen acted as if he did not hear him. He closed his palm gently, and young Master Yaoyue's divine soul immediately turned into dust and scattered. At that moment, the blurry figure seemed to have sensed something, and his voice was extremely resentful. "Good, very good. You killed my son. I won't rest until you're dead." At the same time, tens of thousands of kilometers away in the South China Sea, in the prosperous Supreme Sect, an old man in black sat cross-legged on the ground and spat out a mouthful of scarlet blood. His hair was disheveled as he roared, "Yaoyue, my son, I swear that even if I have to die, I will avenge you." With that, he hammered his chest heavily and spat out another mouthful of blood. He grabbed the ball of blood and quickly formed hand seals with both hands. The ball of blood began to squirm violently and rapidly grow larger. In the end, it turned into a scale. On the scale, the face of a beautiful middle-aged woman with 2 horns on her head could be vaguely seen. Dao Master Tai glared angrily and said with incomparable heartache, "Holy Mother, Yao is dead. The location is in the Great Li Dynasty. You can choose how you want to do it." Almost at that instant, in the Central Sea, a giant dragon that was more than 500 meters long stirred up the wind and clouds, crossing the sea for 3,000 kilometers. An earth-shattering roar sounded from the Moon sect in the North Sea. The patriarch of the Moon sect left the sect and headed straight for the Great Li Dynasty. The patriarch of the West Sea Valley sect was filled with killing intent. At this moment, the entire Tianfeng Sea area was in a thunderous uproar. Countless people were extremely shocked when they sensed this commotion. The capital of the Great Li Dynasty. In the village that was like a paradise, Grand Tutor Ning suddenly felt a surge of emotion. Then, he quickly pinched his fingers and calculated. His expression kept changing as he sighed faintly. The great calamity is coming, and chaos is coming, in the wave viewing tower. After Yi Chen's thunderous attack, his expression was still as calm as water. He looked directly at Wang Xiling, who was the only survivor. As if sensing his killing intent, Wang Xiling's body trembled violently, and for a moment, he peed his pants. "Let him go." Mu Kaiwei could not help but say, "This has little to do with him. He even pleaded for me before." What she said was the truth. Although this matter had started because of Wang Xiling, it was not his original intention. In the end, it was young Master Yaoyue who had forcefully stood up for him. As soon as she finished speaking, Wang Xiling looked at her with deep gratitude in his eyes. Yi Chen retracted his gaze and turned around. "Let's go. Senior. Senior Yi." The moment he turned around, Wang Xiling stammered, "Run, run quickly. You've caused great trouble. Dao Master Tai is so powerful that you can't imagine it." However, Yi Chen did not stop. On the 9th floor of the wave viewing tower, on the highest floor, Two figures whose faces could not be seen silently watched everything that had happened before silently watching the two of them leave. One of the old voices slowly rang out, "This kid has caused a huge disaster this time. Judging from the method he used to kill the patriarch of the spiritual ruins, his strength should be a second-rank martial saint." The response was a clear female voice. "The Moonwatch Patriarch, the Valley Patriarch, and the Green Dragon Goddess are all second-rank martial saints. Among them, the Tao Master Tai is a third-rank martial saint." End of this chapter. Chapter 1143. If there's an unfathomable existence like the Emperor of Dali, this brat will definitely die. At this point, the female voice's tone was slightly regretful. On the other hand, that young lady with the surname Mu has a good temperament and talent. What a pity, outside the Wei viewing tower. Juror, who had been waiting, welcomed Yi Chen and Mu Kaiwei as soon as she saw them. "Young mistress, are you all right? I was so worried." "I'm fine." Mu Kaiwei shook her head lightly. She could not help but ask when she saw Yi Chen turning around to look at the Wei viewing tower without moving, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Yi Chen took a good look at the 9th floor of the Wei viewing tower. His eyes flickered a few times. "Yi Chen, let's not participate in the Emperor's birthday. Let's return to Tianfeng City quickly." "I'm worried." Mu Kaiwei hesitated. Although she did not know much about young Master Yaoyue, she could vaguely guess that his background was terrifying. Not only did Yi Chen kill him, but he also killed the Moon Sect, the Valley God's Gate, and even the 5th Prince. He was probably in big trouble. "It's too late." Yi Chen smiled lightly and looked at the end of the street all of a sudden. Rumble, the entire ground was shaking as if 10,000 horses were galloping. Smoke and dust rose from the end of the street. Under Mu Kaiwei, Juror, and the rest's terrified gazes, they saw an armored army of more than 2,000 people rushing over. Every single one of them was wearing black armor that covered them from head to toe. Even the war horses beneath them were no exception. From afar, they looked like a group of Azuras. "Spirit Armor Army, it's the Spirit Armor Army." Mu Kaiwei's pretty face changed. Rumor had it that the Dali dynasty had a mysterious army that was specially sent by the Emperor. Although there were only 2,000 of them, their combat power was comparable to an army of 200,000. "Surround this place." A man in black armor looked at Yi Chen and the rest coldly after getting off his horse. Then, he rushed into the Wei viewing tower with a few people. "Yi Chen, what should we do?" Mu Kaiwei leaned against Yi Chen by instinct. By then, she knew that the matter had blown up. Otherwise, the Spirit Armor Army would not have intervened. At this moment, the man in black armor from before walked out with some people. A few people behind him were carrying a stretcher, and the 5th Prince's corpse was on the stretcher. The black-armored man pointed at Yi Chen and the rest and shouted, "This person killed the 5th Prince. Take them down." Boom! The thousands of spirit armor soldiers in the surroundings took a step forward in unison, and they emanated a baleful aura that caused the ground to tremble violently. Yi Chen's gaze swept across and landed on the black-armored man. "Do you think you can stop me?" "Mr. Yi, I admit that I'm no match for you. We can't stop you either," the black-armored man said fearlessly, "but you don't dare to move either, because before we came here, the Great Li's 500,000-strong army stationed not far from Tianfeng City has already rushed to Tianfeng City." "What did you say?" Mu Kaiwei thought she had heard wrongly. The black-armored man's expression was cold. "As long as you dare to move, I guarantee that Tianfeng City will be destroyed in less than an hour. Even the King Mu Fort will be no exception." Shameless! Mu Kaiwei's delicate body trembled, and she was extremely anxious. The Great Li had mobilized 500,000 troops. If they were fully equipped and had a martial king to hold the fort, the King Mu Fort would not be able to withstand it. "Are you threatening me?" Yi Chen looked at him quietly. At the next moment, with a step forward, the 500 spirit armor soldiers in the south turned into a bloody mist. They did not even have the chance to scream. Do you know that what I hate the most is being threatened? He took another step forward, and the 500 spirit armor soldiers in the north turned into a bloody mist. The black-armored man's expression changed drastically. If you want to destroy Tianfeng City and the King Mu Fort, go ahead. I won't stop you. Yi Chen took another step forward, and another 500 spirit armor soldiers died. At most, I'll slaughter the greatly after this and wipe out all your families. In the last step, the remaining 500 spirit armor soldiers died. The black-armored man's body was torn into pieces, turning into countless bloody mists that scattered everywhere. Yi Chen, let's go back now. Mu Kaiwei was almost begging. It's too late. Yi Chen shook his head lightly. Even if we set off now, it'll take us half a day to reach Tianfeng City. By the time we get there, I'm afraid we'll already be, then my father. Mu Kaiwei's face was extremely pale. You still don't understand? Yi Chen chuckled. This was a trap from the beginning. It was a trap that used the Emperor's birth as an excuse to trap us in it. We can't take care of ourselves. What should we do next? Mu Kaiwei said helplessly. Kill to break the trap. Yi Chen spat out a few words softly. Then, he waved his sleeve and carried the two women to the south of the capital. Almost at that moment, the tragedy at the Wei viewing tower was spread. It instantly shook the world and shocked the world. The saintess of the moon sect, Shen Man, was dead. The young master of the valley goddess sect, Gu Yuanwu, was dead. The young master of the supreme Yi sect, young master Yaoyue, was dead. The fifth prince, Shang Tiancheng, was dead. The spirit armor army was mobilized, but they were completely wiped out. When this news that was filled with endless blood spread to every corner of the capital, all the forces were shocked. One had to know that whether it was the Moon sect, the Valley Goddess sect, or the Supreme One sect, they were all overlords. Their foundations were not weaker than the Dali dynasty at all. Now, all the overlords had been killed? In an instant, various forces sent people to investigate the real situation in the Wei viewing tower. In the end, they came to a conclusion. The killer, Mad Southern Yi. Half a month ago, perhaps everyone would have been confused and did not know who it was. However, this name had already shaken the entire East Sea and even the Tianfeng Sea area. Mad Southern Yi killed the Spirit Ruins Patriarch of the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven by himself. His divinity even made the Nine Yang Sword Leader and the Grand Purity Palace Master admit defeat. Previously, Yi Chen had been in the limelight because the Spirit Ruins Grotto Heaven was destroyed overnight and the Nine Yang Sword Leader and the Grand Purity Palace Master had mysteriously disappeared. Now that this news spread, everyone's scalps went numb, and a thought flashed through their minds. Is Mad Southern Yi crazy? He killed the people of the overlords without caring about the consequences. Was he really not afraid of revenge? Did he really think that he was invincible? Just as everyone was waiting for the overlords to react, an even more explosive news spread. The Supreme One sect master, the Supreme One, broke out of closed-door cultivation and rushed toward the Dali dynasty alone. His killing intent shook the heavens. The Moon sect's patriarch, the Moon Patriarch, and the Valley Goddess sect's patriarch, the Valley Goddess sect's patriarch, came one after another, demanding an explanation from the Dali dynasty. The Green Dragon clan's patriarch, the Green Dragon Holy Mother, unleashed a tsunami that hit the land for 3,000 kilometers, threatening to avenge young Master Yaoyue. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect. Evil Dad in the City. Chapter 1144. Countless people were horrified by this. Whether it was the Supreme Tao Lord or the Wangyue Patriarch, they were the top figures in the Tianfeng Sea area. Their names and deeds were sung by countless people. Now that the few of them had made a move, it was obvious that this matter could not be resolved peacefully. Everyone knew what kind of storm would be stirred up next. At this moment, an imperial edict came from the Dali Imperial Palace. Mad Southern Yi is tyrannical. He killed a member of the royal family and deserves death. From today onwards, the Dali dynasty and Mad Southern Yi are irreconcilable. The last imperial edict of the Dali dynasty once again ignited the shock in everyone's hearts. It meant that the 5 great forces had joined forces to kill Mad Southern Yi. This had never happened in the history of the Tianfeng Sea area. However, just when everyone was trying to find Yi Chen, they realized that he had suddenly vanished into thin air. In the Dali imperial city, the emperor of Dali, Shang Wudao, sat on the dragon throne and looked down at the crowd below with a gloomy gaze. "You still haven't found him?" All the officials below were silent, and all of them were trembling with fear and terrified to the extreme. At this moment, an old man in black took a step forward and said, "Your Majesty, before this, we sealed the city gates and even activated the Tsang Dragon formation. There's no way that Yi can escape." The person behind him also had a doubtful expression. Once the Tsang Dragon formation was activated, even a martial saint would find it difficult to escape in a short period of time. However, there was nothing unusual about the Tsang Dragon formation. How did that person disappear? The emperor's eyes flickered nonstop. He had planned for this day for a long time, and he felt that there were no mistakes. However, at this moment, he felt a faint sense of unease. At this moment, a person hurriedly walked in and knelt on one knee. "Your Majesty, bad news. Mad Southern Yi has appeared in the Azure Dragon Mine." The moment that was said, the entire place was in an uproar. "What? He's actually in the Azure Dragon Mine? There's no exit in the Azure Dragon Mine. What's he doing there?" The person said again, "Mad Southern Yi killed his way into the mine and used a strange divinity. He actually forcefully devoured the mine." Boom! The Emperor of Dali was shocked. His brows were filled with rage, and then his body disappeared on the spot. He finally knew where his uneasiness came from. When the capital of the Dali dynasty was built, there were great figures who spent a lot of effort to use their magic to move 4 mines to suppress the dragon veins. They were the Green Dragon Mine, the Red Bird Mine, the Black Tortoise Mine, and the White Tiger Mine. It could be said that the 4 mines were related to a country's luck. Now that Yi Chen had appeared in the mines and could devour the mine by force, it was equivalent to destroying the country's luck. How could he not be shocked? In the Azure Dragon Mine, spiritual energy surged. The ground was stained with blood and corpses were piled up like mountains. A ferocious-looking giant beast over 100 feet in size stood in the void. It was a ferocious-looking golden ape with golden fur all over its body and 4 thick limbs. The giant ape opened its mouth and breathed towards the huge mine down below. Inexhaustible natural energies surged towards the golden ape from the mine. It could be seen that the spirit stones in the mine were rapidly darkening at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then turning into powder. On the ground far away, Mu Kaiwei and Jir widened their eyes as they watched this scene in disbelief. The reason being Yi Chen had turned into a giant ape with a murderous aura in their eyes earlier. It was as if he had transformed into a primordial ferocious beast. Boom! After the last trace of spiritual energy was devoured by the giant ape, the entire Azure Dragon Mine collapsed. With a flash of light, the giant ape's body began to sway. Subsequently, it turned into a skinny figure that was less than 8 feet tall, revealing Yi Chen's face. This 9 true spirit transformations is indeed extraordinary. A hint of joy flowed through Yi Chen's eyes as he sensed the surging spiritual energy in his body. The so-called 9 true spirit transformations was a demonic cultivation method that he had obtained from the immortal world. It could transform one's body into 9 types of true spirits and obtain the power of the true spirit. As for the true spirits, they were existences among the primordial ferocious beasts. They were the sky-devouring centipede, the dragon chimera, the primordial demon ape, the sea-splitting mysterious dragon whale, the scarlet flame golden swanee, the tautai, the cheongchi, and the koan pung. Among them, the primordial demon ape was the most famous for its ferocity in battle. It was extremely powerful and loved devouring the spiritual energy in the world. Yi Chen knew very well that when he descended to the ancient desolate realm, he did not have much spiritual energy left. Although he recovered in the northern region later on, he had only recovered to beginner stage nascent soul. Through the battle with the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins, he knew that with his current cultivation base, it might not be enough to fight a few martial saints at the same time. Therefore, he targeted the mine of the Great Li dynasty. He used the 9 true spirit transformations and transformed into the primordial demon ape. He used the power of the demon ape to quickly devour the mine and replenish his spiritual energy. Just one mine had allowed him to reach mid-stage nascent soul. Emperor of Great Li, since you've schemed against me, I'll end your country's fortune today. A cold gleam flashed through Yi Chen's eyes as he thought to this point. He then waved his sleeve and ran towards another vermilion bird mine with Mu Kaiwei and Mu Kaiwei. He was not a fool. Through everything in the Wei viewing tower, he could tell that this was just a trap set up by the Emperor of Great Li. He wanted to make him infuriate the masses and then be attacked by them. He would devour all 4 mines today. At that time, he wanted to see who in the Tianfeng Sea area could fight against him. Not long after he left, a figure in a dragon robe appeared. It was none other than the Emperor of Great Li. The former looked at the ruins of the Azure Dragon Mine with a gloomy gaze. His face twitched as he chased after the aura. Half an hour later, at the Vermilion Bird Mine, Yi Chen devoured all the spiritual energy that was like a river. Meanwhile, his spiritual energy cultivation base had increased from mid-stage nascent soul to late-stage nascent soul. The primordial demon ape that he transformed into became more and more lifelike, as if the primordial demon ape had really descended. I wonder if devouring the remaining 2 spirit stone mines will allow me to step into soul formation. Yi Chen transformed into his human form. He clenched his fists lightly and allowed the true origin energy in his body to surge like a tide. His eyes shone brightly. I have to say, Great Li is really rich. At that moment, a torrent of killing intent suddenly swept over from the void. At the next moment, a figure in a dragon robe slowly appeared. It was the Emperor of Great Li, Shang Wudao, who had chased after him. Shang Wudao swept his gaze around. When he saw the vermilion bird mine that had also turned into ruins, his expression turned grim. Mad Southern Yi, I'll definitely kill you. The 2 mines were gone. This was equivalent to draining half of Great Li's fortune. How could he not feel heartache and madness? Emperor of Great Li. Yi Chen swept his gaze over and looked into his eyes. Do you think you have everything planned? Do you think you can toy with me? I'll definitely kill you. The Emperor of Great Li was so angry that he laughed. He enunciated word by word. Today, no matter if you go to heaven or hell, you won't be able to escape death. Chapter 1145. In the abandoned Vermilion Bird Mine, not long after the enraged Emperor of Dali appeared. The wind and clouds above the capital of Dali suddenly changed color, and then they began to tremble violently. The commotion was as if the sky was about to collapse, shaking the world. Immediately after, a cold shout resounded through the air. Shang Wudao, I'll give you 10 breaths of time. If you don't open this Tsang Dragon formation, I'll destroy your capital today. This cold shout was like thunder, completely shaking the capital of Dali Kingdom. At that moment, whether it was mortals or cultivators, they all heard the sound of thunder in their ears. Killing intent, intense killing intent. Madness, extreme madness. Under this invisible might, many cultivators died on the spot. Those who were lucky enough to survive were also severely injured. Someone spat blood and said with a shocked expression, Grand Taoist Lord, it's the Grand Taoist Lord of the South Sea sect. He must be here to avenge his son. Is this the terror of the number 1 person in the Tianfeng Sea area? Just his voice alone is invincible. At this moment, countless people's hearts trembled. See Xing, that old man is finally here. Faced with such a situation, the Emperor of Dali, who was originally furious, was not shocked. Instead, he was delighted. Mad Southern Yi, I told you that you'll definitely die today. He glanced at Yi Chen coldly. Then, he took a step forward and left. After he left, Mu Kaiwei heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at Yi Chen in shock and said, Yi Chen, that voice earlier was. If I'm not wrong, that person is the Grand Taoist Lord of the Grand Yi sect. Yi Chen lifted his head to look at the sky, his eyes flickering. What? Mu Kaiwei's body swayed when she heard that. Deep fear surged in her beautiful eyes. Grand Taoist Lord. Although she was from the East Sea, she had heard of the Grand Taoist Lord's name. To her, such an existence was no different from a god. And now, such an existence had really come. Thinking to this point, she seemed to have thought of something, and her pretty face suddenly turned extremely pale. He's here to avenge Master Yaoyue? Yi Chen, why you should leave now? Her voice was trembling as she said, Don't worry about us. Go. You're no match for the Emperor of Dali and the Tai Taoist Lord working together. Son-in-law. Jior also panicked. Yi Chen's expression remained the same. He shook his head lightly and said something that almost made the two ladies break down. I'm afraid it's not 2, but 5. The south gate of the capital of Dali Kingdom. Fellow Taoist Tai, I'll remove the Tsang Dragon formation now. The Emperor of the Dali dynasty, who was ascending, spoke slowly. A golden jade seal shot out from his sleeve, releasing 9 streams of dragon chi that swept in all directions. Boom! The heavenly dragon formation that enveloped the entire capital immediately disappeared, which meant that outsiders could easily enter the capital. Buzz! As the void trembled violently, everyone saw a figure step out of the distorted space. It was a black-clothed old man. His face was cold, and his eyes were filled with a destructive aura. The very moment he appeared, the world seemed to have darkened, and an invisible pressure shrouded the entire capital of the Dali dynasty. At that moment, countless people could not help but kneel down, their faces filled with shock. The Tai sect, the Tai Taoist Lord. He's stronger than the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins. Yi Chen looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes. From that figure, he could sense an aura that was more than 2 times stronger than the Patriarch of Spirit Ruins. Fellow C, the Emperor of Dali stood in the air as the dragon chi on his body surged. He looked at him and said, This is my country. Please retract your pressure. Shang Wudao, I respect you, so I sent my son, Yao Yu, to congratulate you on your birthday. Now, he's dead in your territory. Dao Master Tai Yi snorted coldly, and the pressure on his body increased by more than several times. His eyes were filled with cold light. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'll kill you too. As soon as he said that, the entire capital of Dali Kingdom fell silent. Everyone who was watching this scene was trembling in fear. The Emperor of Dali's gaze darkened. Just as he was about to speak, the originally bright sky suddenly darkened. Boom, boom, boom! Outside the city, the sound of water surging over could be heard. The commotion was like a tsunami. There's a flood, help! One could faintly hear the screams, wails, and cries of pain. In front of everyone's eyes, the entire Dali Kingdom was surrounded by waves that were dozens of feet high. Countless cities and trees were all swept up by the rolling wave. Roar! With a roar that sounded like a dragon's roar, a huge dragon that was more than 60 meters long soared into the sky from the wave. It was a green dragon. It swayed its huge body and looked down at the Emperor of Dali with a pair of sharp eyes. A cold female voice came from its mouth. Shang Wudao, if you don't hand over the beast today, I'll flood the capital of Dali Kingdom and let Dali Kingdom die with my son. Green Dragon, Holy Mother! The Emperor of Dali recognized it immediately. Shang Wudao, the Virgin of the Moon Clan, Shin Man, died in the capital of the Dali Kingdom. You must give me an explanation today. An old man wearing a grayish-white robe slowly walked out from behind Taoist Master Taoist. There's also the young master of the Valley Goddess sect. Following the distortion of space, a black-faced elder appeared. At the same time, his furious voice exploded in the low and deep sky. The ancestral patriarch of the Moon Clan, the ancestral patriarch of the Valley God sect, the giants from the North Ocean and the West Ocean are here too. Gasps abruptly rang out from the ground as everyone watched this scene in shock. The Grand One Supremacy of the South Sea, the Full Moon Patriarch of the North Sea, the Divine Valley Patriarch of the West Sea, the Patriarch of the Green Dragon race of the Central Sea, the Green Dragon Holy Mother, these existences that stood at the pinnacle of the entire Heaven-Wind Sea region were rarely seen for hundreds or even thousands of years. Who would have thought that all of them would appear together today? The heavens were about to be overturned. The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. Many people of the Dali dynasty gradually felt their hearts sink. Now that the 4 supergiants had all arrived, if they fought, Dali Kingdom would be defenseless. In this deathly silent atmosphere, the Emperor of Dali smiled faintly. Everyone, I can understand your pain. In fact, my son, Tiancheng, also died in the hands of that person. Speaking of this, his eyes were filled with violence. 2 mines of Dali Kingdom were also destroyed by him. Cut the crap. Where is he? Taoist Master Taoist erupted with endless murderous intent. End of this chapter. Chapter 1146. This person is currently in the Vermilion Bird Mine. Everyone, follow me. The Emperor of Dali Dynasty did not hesitate. After saying that, his body shook and he disappeared on the spot. Split up. We can't let this person escape. The Patriarch of Wangyue's gaze was grim as he followed the Emperor of Dali from the east. The Grand Taoist venerate the Green Dragon Goddess, and the Patriarch of Valley God ran from the west, south, and north. At the Vermilion Bird Mine, Mu Kaiwei fell to the ground. Her beautiful face was pale as she mumbled, "Yi Chen, I'm sorry. I've caused you harm. I've caused you harm." She had also heard the conversation between the Emperor of Dali, the Grand Taoist venerate, and the rest. 5 martial saints. 5 martial saints wanted to kill Yi Chen. And all of this was because of her. If Yi Chen had not gone to the Guanlan Tower to save her, he would not have killed the Holy Lady of the Moon sect, Shun Man, the young master of the Valley God sect, Gu Yuwu, and young master Yaoyue. She had caused great trouble for Yi Chen. Jiur cried as well, "Young mistress, this has nothing to do with you. It's my own choice." Yi Chen looked calm as he waited quietly for the arrival of the 5 of them. The true origin energy in his body surged like a tsunami. Although it was all because of Mu Kaiwei. However, he did not regret it. That was because he had achieved his goal of coming to the capital of Dali. He knew the identities of Qianqian and the rest, and he also knew that Su Yuhan and the rest were in Zhongzhou. Moreover, the culprit of this matter was the Emperor of Dali. Ever since he was still in Tianfeng City, the Emperor of Dali had already set up a trap. Even though he knew that it was a trap, he still plunged in without hesitation. He did not care about any schemes or trick. He only believed that he could break through everything with his strength. Jiur could not help but cry. Her eyes were red. "Young master, let's escape. Let's escape to a place where they can't find us." "Escape? Where can we escape to? Even if I have to go to the ends of the earth, I will avenge my son." At that moment, a cold voice exploded in the air. Then, 5 silhouettes appeared in the void. They were the Tai Taoist Lord, the Emperor of Dali, the Green Dragon Goddess, the Wangyue Ancestor, and the Goddess of Grains. As soon as the 5 of them appeared, they joined hands to seal off the space within a radius of 100,000 feet. Their intense killing intent and pressure almost materialized. Mu Kaiwei and Jiur immediately vomited blood. Even so, Mu Kaiwei still hugged the cute little baby in her arms tightly. Under that pressure, a golden light erupted from the little fellow's chest, silently dispelling the pressure. Yi Chen landed on the ground and stood before the two ladies. He waved his sleeve and dispersed the pressure. It really is you. Dao Master Tai glared at Yi Chen and said with a cold smile, "Do you still remember what I said to you after you killed my son? This seat won't rest until you're dead. Countless people have died in my hand. Everyone wants to fight me to the death," Yi Zichen said. Yi Chen looked at him without changing his expression, "But they're the ones who died in the end. How arrogant!" The green dragon goddess's eyes were filled with resentment. "How dare you kill my son? I swear that I'll extract the souls of everyone related to you and refine them so that they'll live in pain forever." Mad Southern Yi, did you expect this day to come? The Emperor of Dali had a mocking expression. You're able to kill the spiritual ruins patriarch at such a young age. It's obvious that you have extraordinary talent. Unfortunately, you're destined to die here today. Why are you talking so much to him? Either he dies today or I die. The goddess of grain's ancestor's expression was ferocious. He grabbed out with his palm after saying that. It turned into a majestic pillar of light that looked like a human-shaped hand that charged at Yi Chen. "Step back." Yi Chen's expression remained the same. He waved his sleeve and sent Mu Kaiwei and Jur flying. "Yi Chen, no," Mu Kaiwei said heartbreakingly. "Break." Right at that moment, a huge ancient seal word suddenly appeared in the air. As soon as the word was formed, it turned into terrifying runes. Rumble! The majestic pillar of light immediately exploded amidst the terrifying runes, and the energy spread out like a shockwave. "Who is it?" The goddess of grain's patriarch's expression changed slightly. Even Taoist Master Tai Yi and the rest were no exception. Only the Emperor of Dali's expression changed slightly. He turned around with a gloomy gaze. Under his gaze, a middle-aged scholar in a green robe slowly walked out. Grand Tutor Ning, Taoist Master Tai Yi and the rest focused their gazes. The Emperor of Dali's expression was extremely grim as he said coldly, "Grand Tutor, are you determined to become my enemy?" What he did not want to see the most had happened. Under everyone's gaze, Grand Tutor Ning walked over slowly. There was no cultivation fluctuation on his body, but he seemed to have overlapped with the great Tao of heaven and earth. Even Yi Chen was extremely surprised. He did not expect Grand Tutor Ning to stand out at this time. Facing the Emperor of Dali's gloomy gaze, Grand Tutor Ning stopped and looked at him. A few seconds later, he sighed faintly, "Wu Dao, do you still remember what you promised me 1,000 years ago?" The Emperor of Dali's name was Shang Wudao. In the entire Dali dynasty, only Grand Tutor Ning could call him by his name. "Back then, you and I met in Zhongzhou," Grand Tutor Ning muttered to himself. "At that time, you were heroic and talented. You were determined to create a prosperous era for the people of the world, and I joined you because of that. That's how it has been 1,000 years." Shang Wudao was gloomy and silent. "In these 1,000 years, I've witnessed Dali grow from a small dynasty that swallowed humiliation to an existence that suppressed the Tianfeng Sea area." Grand Tutor Ning seemed to sigh. "I've also witnessed your ambition growing day by day. You've become selfish, violent, suspicious, greedy, and insatiable. You've become a flatterer and have long forgotten your original intentions." "Shut up!" As he spoke, Shang Wudao's face was flushed red. He seemed to be exasperated as he said, "I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to become my enemy because of an outsider?" "I'll also ask you one last time." Grand Tutor Ning stared at him. "Today, as long as you withdraw, I'll still be your subject, and Dali will still be your Dali. Ha ha ha. What a nice, still my subject." Shang Wudao suddenly laughed out loud. "Ning Haoren, how dare you threaten me? Aren't you thinking too highly of yourself?" "Forget it." Grand Tutor Ning sighed softly and turned around to look at Yi Chen. "Give me the 5th prince's soul." At that moment, Shang Wudao's expression changed slightly. Yi Chen nodded lightly and waved his sleeve. A soul shot toward the former immediately. After Grand Tutor Ning caught it, He looked at the fifth prince's soul that was about to dissipate and said benevolently, "Child, who sent you to Wave Watching Tower? Tell me everything." His voice was like the voice of the great Tao, giving off a sense of familiarity. One would choose to believe everything without any precaution. The fifth prince's soul was not on guard at all. He said blankly, "Father secretly ordered me to go to Wave Watching Tower." End of this chapter. Chapter 1147. Bulsh *t. Shang Wudao immediately cursed. On the other hand, Dao Master Tai and the rest frowned slightly. Surprisingly, they did not choose to stop him. The fifth prince's soul continued, "Father asked me to invite young Master Yaoyue, Saintess Shin Man, and the young master of the sect of grains to eat at the Wave-Watching Tower. He also ordered me to invite young Master Wang Xiling of the Heavenly Sword sect. B*****. I'll kill you." Shang Wudao's expression was slightly ferocious. Then, he actually reached out with his hand, as if he wanted to snatch the fifth prince's soul from Grand Tutor Ning's hands. Boom! At this moment, the Moon Sect's patriarch, who had been silent all this while, suddenly stopped him and said coldly, "Fellow Shang, why are you so agitated? Let him continue." The eyes of the three of them flickered non-stop. Everyone present had lived for more than 1,000 years, so they were able to detect the abnormality from just a single detail. At the banquet, young Master Yaoyue and the rest did not know about the conflict between young Master Wang Xiling and Mad Southern Yi. I was the one who brought it up on my father's behalf. As expected, after young Master Yaoyue found out about the small conflict between Wang Xiling and Mad Southern Yi, I deliberately bragged about Mad Southern Yi's achievements to provoke young Master Yaoyue. As he spoke, Dao Master Tai and the rest looked at Shang Wudao, their eyes filled with sharpness. "Fellow Shang, is that true?" The green dragon goddess's gaze was unfriendly. Initially, they thought that Yi Chen had killed their people. Never had they thought that there would be such a scheme and conspiracy. If what the fifth prince said was true, then it must be Shang Wudao who caused this outcome today. Yi Chen nodded secretly. A hint of admiration flashed through his eyes as he looked at Grand Tutor Ning. It had to be said that it was no wonder that Grand Tutor Ning was an existence that had become a saint through literature. He possessed great wisdom and could easily see through this situation. Fellow cultivators, don't listen to this unfilial son's excuse. This has nothing to do with me. Shang Wudao's expression was extremely calm as he sneered. Have you ever wondered why ye killed young Master Yaoyue and the rest but left behind the unfilial son's soul? The eyes of Dao Master Tai and the rest immediately flickered when they heard that. In my opinion, ye must have done something to the unfilial son's soul. Shang Wudao saw all of this and said again, "Everyone, all of you are extraordinary, so you should know that it's not difficult to implant a memory into a person's divine soul, right? No matter what, it's a fact that ye killed my son, a fact that can't be changed." The green dragon Holy Mother smiled coldly. "I don't care if there is any conspiracy. I only know that if you owe money, you must pay. You must pay with your life. Then come." Yi Chen took a deep breath in as the golden flames in his eyes danced non-stop. "I'd like to experience your techniques today." As soon as these words came out, the temperature of the world suddenly dropped. "Attack!" Tai Daoist Master was the first to speak. A sage Dharma idol immediately condensed behind him, causing the void to tremble. "Wait!" At that moment, a slightly pleading voice came from behind Yi Chen. Then, he saw Mu Kaiwei walking over quickly while carrying Meng Meng and Jiro. "What are you doing here?" Yi Chen frowned. Mu Kaiwei smiled sadly when she saw Yi Chen's displeased expression. She then put down Meng Meng and knelt heavily before Tai Daoist Master and the rest. "Seniors," a sad smile appeared on her pale face, "my name is Mu Kaiwei. All of this happened because of me. It has nothing to do with Yi Chen, whether it's the Holy Maiden Shin Man, young Master Gu, or young Master Yaoyue. They all died because of me today. Kaiwei is willing to atone for her sins." Kai Wei is willing to use her life to pay for young Master Yaoyue and the rest. After saying that, she bit her lips, and a hint of determination flashed across her beautiful face. Then, she raised her hand and slapped her head heavily. Young mistress! Jiu'er cried. Bang! Just as her hand was about to hit her head, she realized that she could not move, as if she was imprisoned. The former opened her eyes and looked at Yi Chen pleadingly. Yi Chen, and no, she had let Yi Chen down. She did not want to implicate Yi Chen. Yi Chen said calmly when he met her gaze, "I'll take responsibility for what I've done. Why would I need a woman to die for me? Everyone, there's a perpetrator for every injustice, and there's a debtor for every debt. I killed all of your loved ones. Come, let's see if you'll die today." At this point, he waved his sleeve and sent Mu Kai Wei and the other two flying. "Take care of my daughter." "Yi Chen, don't!" Mu Kai Wei screamed at the top of her lungs. "Let's fight." Yi Chen was unmoved. He took a step forward, and a dazzling divine glow suddenly surged around him. His body suddenly expanded. Crackle, crackle, under everyone's shocked gazes, his body expanded and changed. In the end, he turned into a giant golden ape that soared into the sky. The giant golden ape was incomparably tall, and its entire body was burning with flames. It was like a primordial ferocious beast that had descended into the world. It was filled with an extremely monstrous fiendish aura, as if it wanted to tear this world apart with its arms. 9 transformations of the true spirit, the manifestation of the primordial demon ape. What divinity is this? At this moment, the pupils of Dao Master Tai Yi and the rest constricted, and their eyes were filled with fear. Roar, an earth-shaking roar came from Yi Chen, who had transformed into the primordial demon ape. The common people are in chaos, the world is on fire, I'm the only one in the world. I don't care what divinity he has. With the 5 of us attacking, we'll kill gods and Buddhas below the Emperor stage. The Emperor of Dali, Shang Wudao, shouted. The dragon energy in his body surged, and a golden dragon energy turned into a golden spear that shot out. Kill. Dao Master Tai Yi took out a huge cauldron. It seemed like he wanted to absorb the void into it. It descended from the sky and covered Yi Chen directly. Yao'er, if you're still alive, open your eyes and watch. I'll avenge you today. The green dragon goddess roared and revealed her true form of a dragon that was 60 meters long. Her claws tore through the air and grabbed at Yi Chen. Full moon finger. The patriarch of the moon sect formed a giant handprint in the air. It turned into a giant finger that covered Yi Chen. Rumble, the 4 martial saints attacked with all their might, and the power that erupted almost caused the world to tremble. The battle erupted just like that. At that moment, countless people outside were watching the scene in shock. They could already see Yi Chen's tragic end. 4 martial saints attacked. Yi Chen could not escape. Just as the remaining patriarch of the Valley God sect was about to join the battle, he suddenly felt Grand Tutor Ning's calm gaze. The patriarch's expression changed slightly as he said threateningly, "Grand Tutor Ning? Do you really want to go against us?" Buzz, as the void trembled, a golden scripture appeared in Grand Tutor Ning's hand. The scripture shone with golden light, as if golden words were spreading out. End of this chapter. Chapter 1148. The Book of Great Path. You took out the Book of Great Path. Are you crazy? Looking at the golden book in Grand Tutor Ning's hand, Ancestor Goddess of Grains was in disbelief. The Book of Great Path was the manifestation of a scholar who became a saint. Scholars did not cultivate martial techniques, nor did they cultivate their physical bodies. They cultivated their scholarly chi and heaven and earth. The Book of Great Path contained their own understanding of the laws of heaven and earth. Therefore, the Book of Great Path was extremely precious. It was even more important than one's life. However, Grand Tutor Ning still managed to cultivate it. Grand Tutor! At this moment, many people who were watching the battle from the outside were moved. Especially the students who cultivated the way of literature. It could be said that all the scholars in the entire Dali dynasty were the disciples of the Grand Tutor. They could disrespect the Emperor of Dali, but they had to regard Grand Tutor Ning as a saint. Seeing that the Grand Tutor was going to intervene in this unprecedented battle, many of the students could not help but feel nervous. I don't care if I'm crazy or not. I'll just do what I should. At this moment, Grand Tutor Ning was surrounded by a thick scholarly chi. The golden book in his hand hung above his head, emitting a light that was 10 times more blinding than the sun. As the saying goes, when a scholar meets a soldier, he can't be reasoned with. Since you want to die, don't blame me. Today, I'd like to see how powerful you, the #1 saint in the Tianfeng Sea, are. The patriarch of the goddess of grains roared. In the next moment, his hand broke through the void and punched towards Grand Tutor Ning. Hanwu Common Life Fist. Under this punch, the wind from the punch was like a raging torrent that swept in all directions. It contained the power to topple mountains and overturn seas. The skinny Grand Tutor Ning was like a grain of sand in the ocean under such an attack, unable to withstand the storm. However, at that moment, the golden book that had been hanging above Grand Tutor Ning's head suddenly flipped open. Buzz, as the void trembled, a majestic righteousness of heaven and earth radiated from the golden book, covering a radius of 1,000 feet. Kaboom! In the face of such righteousness, the attack from the Patriarch of Grains collapsed abruptly and turned into violent energy that dissipated into the air. Great! The Grand Tutor is invincible! As expected of the Grand Tutor. Such righteousness can be said to be the best in our greatly. Many scholars of the Dali dynasty, who had been watching the battle between the two of them, cheered when they saw this scene. I once heard that in the Central Plains, the Tao of literature is flourishing. There are highly learned Confucians who can kill demons who cultivate evil arts with just a shout. In the past, I thought that it was just a rumor. I never thought that it was actually true. Grand Preceptor Ning is one of the 3 dukes of the Great Li dynasty. He gathered the fortune of all the scholars in the world, and he once relied on a piece of calligraphy to suppress a Sea clan for 1,000 years. On the other hand, the faces of the others were filled with astonishment. Obviously, they'd never imagined that an extremely weak scholar would actually be so terrifying. Roar! A deafening roar shook the 9 heavens. The primordial demon ape that Yi Chun had transformed into was completely golden. His body expanded to more than 15 meters, and his ferocious might was monstrous. If you want to kill me, all of you will die today. Boom, boom, boom. He took a step forward and dived forward, taking the initiative to attack the 4 martial sages who had joined hands to attack him. As he swung his fists, his thick arms were like 2 true dragons, scattering all the clouds in the sky. Golden flames bloomed all over his body, and it was as if the stars in the universe were smashing down from the sky. It was extremely dazzling, and no one could look at it directly. You deserve to die for killing my son. His black clothes fluttered, and his black hair danced wildly. He formed a powerful seal with his hand. In the blink of an eye, a Dharma idol that looked like an ancient god appeared behind him. The projection was dignified, and its aura was monstrous. It was like a god that had descended from the heavens. Thud! At that moment, heaven and earth shook and heavy rain poured down. It was as if countless ferocious beasts were roaring in the air. The onlookers were all terrified. Was this the might of a saint? As Tai Daoist Master formed the seal, the gigantic projection behind him overlapped its hands. Then, it transformed into a gigantic Qilin shadow that roared at Yi Chun. The gigantic Qilin shadow was covered in purple energy. It was more than 30 meters long, and it was like a giant star smashing down. Its might was monstrous. Roar! Yi Chun shouted. Instead of retreating, he advanced. He took the initiative to charge at the purple Qilin shadow while moving his enormous primordial demon ape body. He felt like he had endless strength in his body. It was as if a primordial ferocious beast had descended to the mortal world. In the blink of an eye, he met the Qilin shadow. Then, he raised his fist and charged. Break! Boom! Endless golden light erupted from his fist. The sky lost its color, and the ground trembled and rumbled. The people who were watching this scene from afar were all shocked. Under such power, if they were to rush forward, their bodies would probably be shattered in an instant. Even their souls would be destroyed. Rumble, under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, the gigantic Qilin shadow collapsed with a loud bang and turned into purple gas. Even Tai Daoist Master was an exception. However, he did not think that he could severely injure Yi Chen with a single attack. Otherwise, the Patriarch of Spiritual Ruins would not have died. Mad Southern Yi die. In the blink of an eye, the Wangyue Patriarch teleported from 300 meters away. A purple medicinal cauldron expanded out of thin air and shot toward Yi Chen's head. In an instant, the weather changed. Countless bolts of lightning appeared in the depths of the void and gathered in the huge medicinal cauldron. This is the Thunder Accumulation Cauldron of the Wangyue sect. A powerhouse who was watching sucked in a breath of cold air and introduced. Rumor has it that the founder of the Wangyue sect once traveled in the dark and saw a purple cauldron being nurtured in the thunderclouds. The purple cauldron can gather all lightning. I didn't expect the old bastard Wangyue to bring this treasure out. Looks like he wants to kill ye. The Emperor of Dali's expression was solemn. I want you to be struck by lightning. The Wangyue Patriarch formed hand seals with both hands. Suddenly, tens of thousands of lightning rumbled within the purple cauldron in the void. Then, it turned into a gigantic pillar of lightning that struck at Yi Chen with an unparalleled might. The lightning descended, and the might of the heavens was terrifying. Under such might, even Tai Daoist Master, the Green Dragon Goddess, and the Emperor of Dali had to retreat. Destroy me with lightning? Yi Chen seemed to be mocking. Not to mention that his physical body was not afraid of the might of lightning. The primordial demon ape that he had transformed into had swallowed countless bolts of lightning since it was born. Now that the Wangyue Patriarch had taken out the lightning-containing cauldron and wanted to kill him with the help of the lightning, it was no different from showing off in front of an expert. Then, under everyone's gaze, Yi Chen stomped his feet. The giant ape raised the sky and opened its ferocious mouth to suck hard. The gigantic pillar of lightning that made one's heart tremble was directly swallowed into its mouth and did not move at all. What? Everyone was so shocked that their eyeballs almost popped out of their socket. The flawless chapter of The Genius Nanny in the City will continue to be updated on the mobile game bar. There are no advertisements on the website. Please bookmark and recommend the mobile game bar. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect Evil Dad in the City. Chapter 1149. How is this possible? Everyone who witnessed this scene was stunned, and their eyes revealed an expression as if they had seen a ghost. They could not figure out why this would be the outcome. They could not figure out why Yi Chen could devour lightning. This is impossible. The Wangyue Patriarch took a few steps back, his eyes filled with disbelief. The Thunder Accumulation Cauldron was the ultimate treasure of the Wangyue sect. It was born in the thunderclouds, and the lightning it summoned was more than 10 times more terrifying than ordinary lightning. However, it could not hurt Yi Chen. Shock flashed through the eyes of the three of them. Although they knew that Yi Chen was extraordinary, they did not expect him to be so strange. Grand Tutor Ning, who was fighting the Patriarch of Valley God, paused. Shock surged in his eyes. Clearly, he had seen what had happened. I don't believe it. Again. The Wangyue Patriarch roared and formed a seal again, controlling the Thunder Accumulation Cauldron in the air. Rumble, another huge pillar of lightning descended from the sky. It was 30% more powerful than the previous one, but the outcome was the same. Haha, Yi Chen smirked in disdain. He grabbed the Thunder Accumulation Cauldron from afar, and it shot toward Yi Chen immediately. No. The Wangyue patriarch roared and immediately performed a hand seal, trying to summon the thunder accumulation cauldron back. However, his so-called ultimate treasure did not listen to his orders at that moment. It fell into Yi Chen's hands like a swallow returning to its nest. The blood contract was forcefully erased. Blech. His mind was damaged, and he was furious. The Wangyue patriarch could not help but spit a mouthful of blood. This brat's methods are extremely strange. We can't help him. Let's attack together. The Emperor of Dali, Shang Wudao, had a grim look in his eyes. Clearly, he could tell that something was wrong. He shouted and took the lead to attack. Rumble, 4 terrifying auras suddenly surged, shaking heaven and earth, causing despair. Other than the green dragon goddess, who had revealed her dragon form, the other 3 had their avatars appear behind them, and a spirit treasure floated above their heads. Kill! The 4 of them were filled with killing intent as they attacked at the same time. The sky changed color, and a murderous aura covered the entire space. Supreme One Sword. Daoist Supremacy stretched out his hand, and a sword pellet appeared out of thin air. As soon as the sword orb appeared, it was accompanied by a dazzling green rainbow. A soaring sword aura tore through the sky like a peerless immortal sword. Tai Sword. The sword of the founder of the Greater One sect. This sword had once killed no less than 5 martial saints. It was known as the #1 spiritual treasure in the Tianfeng Sea region. Imperial Killing Fist. Shang Wudao, the Emperor of Dali, let out a long roar, and beams of dragon chi shot from every corner of the capital of Dali. Die. The gigantic WRM that the Green Dragon Holy Mother had transformed into swayed and charged at Yi Chen like it was moving mountains and seas. Good timing. Yi Chen could not stop smirking. He leaped into the air, and the crowd saw the giant ape rising into the sky. It was a fatal punch, and it was ferocious. The first attack was the Emperor of Dali Dynasty's Emperor's Killer Fist. The Emperor's Killer Fist that gathered the Emperor's will was like the arm of a god and demon. It collided with Yi Chen's primordial demon Ape Fist. Humph! The Emperor of Dali grunted as shock rose within him. His punch was protected by the Emperor's chi, but it was still almost shattered by Yi Chen. Boom! At that moment, the Green Dragon Holy Mother's gigantic body collided with Yi Chen. The terrifying force from her body, which was more than 60 meters tall, sent Yi Chen flying 300 meters away. Die for me. The Taoist master, who was close by, waved the Tai sword in his hand. The Tai sword's sword gleam, that was like a peerless immortal sword, stood on Yi Chen's arm directly. Shatter! Yi Chen groaned in pain. As soon as he gripped the Tai sword, countless cracks appeared on the Tai sword like shattered glass. Following a series of crackling sounds, Taoist Lord Daoi's sword suddenly collapsed. Even so, a bloody wound that was as wide as a finger appeared on Yi Chen's right arm. It was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Blurred. After the Taoist master spat a mouthful of blood, he was not sad. Instead, he was happy. He's injured. Kill. The patriarch of Wangyue went completely crazy. His green clothes fluttered in the wind, and his long hair danced in the wind. At that moment, the Emperor of Dali retreated instead of advancing. With a flash of his body, he dashed into the distance. Over there, Mu Kaiwei and Zhe were holding Meng Meng as they watched the scene nervously. When they saw the former's actions, the 2 women were so scared that their faces turned pale. Shang Wudao, how can you be so shameless? The first to notice it was Grand Tutor Ning. A hint of disappointment flashed through his eyes. Clearly, Shang Wudao felt that it would be difficult to determine the victor if the 4 of them attacked Yi Chen together. Therefore, he decided to target Mu Kaiwei and the rest. He tried to control Mu Kaiwei, Zhe, and Meng Meng to threaten Yi Chen. Even though Grand Tutor Ning knew Shang Wudao's motive, he could do nothing because the Patriarch of Goddess of Valley did not give him a chance to escape. Shang Wudao, you're courting death. At this moment, the world suddenly shook with an incomparably ghastly loud sound. At that moment, Yi Chen, who had transformed into the primordial demon ape, had his hair stand on end. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. He was truly furious. He was not afraid of how Shang Wudao and the rest would kill him. What truly angered him was that these people had touched his reverse scale. Meeting his gaze, Dao Master Tai and the rest felt a chill in their hearts, but they did not back down. Mad Southern Yi, do you feel heartache? When you killed my son, how could I not feel heartache? The Green Flood Dragon Holy Mother laughed maniacally. Today we will make you watch as everyone related to you die tragically one after another, including your daughter. On the other side, Mu Kaiwei was running away with Meng Meng in her arms. The little girl in her arms seemed to cry out in fear. Daddy, just the word daddy, made Yi Chen fall into complete madness. Endless black energy surged in his eyes as killing intent soared into the sky. Get lost. That was his daughter. If anything happened to his daughter, how was he going to explain himself even if he found Su Yuhan and his parents? Roar! He let out an earth-shattering roar as he formed a fist seal. Like a primordial ferocious beast, he charged at the Patriarch of Moonview who was blocking him. Boom! The Patriarch of Moonview's chest collapsed heavily. He let out a blood-curdling scream as he was sent flying. Meanwhile, the attacks of Dao Master Tai and the rest landed on Yi Chen. Endless fist energy surged out as if the world was shaking and the sky was churning. He's crazy. The eyelids of Dao Master Tai and the rest twitched. At the next moment, Yi Chen spat a mouthful of blood. He could not care less about wiping the blood off. He took a step forward and crossed 3,000 meters in an instant. Everyone saw a giant golden ape charging up from the sky. It carried boundless golden light that filled the world as it charged straight at the greatly Emperor Shang Wudao. P.S. I've eaten too much chili recently and my hemorrhoids are acting up. I can't sit still. I've asked everyone to write 2 chapters today. There's no excuse. Under normal circumstances, I'll do 3 chapters. If I'm in good condition and efficient, I'll do 4 chapters. End of this chapter.